Move heaven and earth for Chairman Gonzalo. Oh, man. Maoists are like, they're just political extremists. That's like the best way to describe them, is that they're just political extremists. Yeah. There's really no other way to describe them. They're the most extreme of any group, of any, like, I guess, left-wing group. Yes. Yeah, but Trump communists, the thing about Trump communists is he's not even like that. The thing that's so, like, disgusting about Trump communists is that instead of just being a crazy Maoist, he also adds on, like, all of the, like, kind of academic leftist stuff to it as well. And so then you have, like, a mix between, like, this, like, stupid Maoism and then this, like, academic leftism, and it just becomes, like, the worst result. It just becomes really stupid, really, really stupid. Also, like, that guy, he's never been right about anything he's challenged us on. He's never been right about it. Like, he's never been right about any of the things he's challenged us on. Like, I remember this one time, he was talking about Frederick Douglass. He was like, hey, you know, I wonder why all these patriotic socialists don't talk about Frederick Douglass. He wouldn't have agreed with them. And then you actually read what Frederick Douglass said. And it's like, yeah, he actually basically did agree with us. He was maybe not as enthusiastically, but he basically did agree with us. And so, like, he just says stupid stuff. He just says, like, really stupid stuff. But I don't think he's going to be around for very long. He has about a year before his clout runs out, because in a year's time, we will take over the Communist Party, and he will get purged. He will be purged from the Louisiana Communist Party. I feel like people on Twitter, they underestimate our plan. They think it's like, they think we're just sending people into the party. They have no idea how deep we've gotten into the multiple clubs and branches of the party. And, you know, I don't mind them not knowing, because the less they know, the easier it is for us. It's just going to be such a rude awakening to them when, like, we actually take over the Communist Party, because it seems so impossible. But, like, if you guys knew what I knew, I'm extremely confident of our plan. Extremely, extremely confident. I'm just going to tell you guys about this little controversy. It's very minor controversy, but I made a tweet referencing Maureen Perry, and he was talking about Vipper's conception of popular monarchy. And basically, what he's stating is that, based upon Vipper's conception of popular monarchy, the monarch allies with the lower classes, so this would be like mainly the peasantry, but also some of the townsfolk, against the nobility, right? And he's speaking in the context of the Tsardom of Muscovy, specifically Ivan the Terrible, because what a lot of people don't know is that during Ivan the Terrible's rule, there actually was a spread of local democracy. That's why he also calls it democratic monarchy. There was a spread of local democracy, the peasantry and the townsfolk, the right to elect their own local leaders. And so, of course, this also challenged the power of the local nobility. And so basically what he's saying is that Ivan allied with the lower classes against the boyars. And this is just extremely, like, demonstrably true. I mean, it culminates into the Oprachina. I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but basically it was a kind of land reform where Ivan confiscated the vast majority of the lands owned by the boyars. And he set up this new institution in which he basically had his own people not owning the land, but like operationally using the land. But he was the final owner of the land. So it's kind of a nationalization of all the land that outmoded the boyars at the time, right? And so I said this is the key to Stalinism. Why did I say it's the key to Stalinism? Because Stalin did something very similar. Stalin also allied with the peasantry, specifically the middle peasant and the working class, not only against the kulaks and the other more traditional segments of the upper classes, but also even against the party elite, which is why there's lots of speeches he gave announcing the party bureaucracy. I mean, this is also, it goes along with the purges. Also, it goes along with the fact that Stalin encouraged criticism of the party bureaucracy. He encouraged criticism at all levels of the party bureaucracy. And he was doing this as a representative of the popular peasant majority. And so there's an obvious similarity here between the popular monarchy of Ivan the Terrible and the leadership of Stalin. On the one hand, there was a democratization, right? On the other hand, there's a powerful leader who led this process and, in his alliance with the lower classes, fought against the quote-unquote nobility. In this case, it's the party nomenclature, the party elites. And you see this not just with Stalin, you see the same thing with Mao, and you see the same thing with Xi Jinping today in his anti-corruption purges. So I was making a very simple point that you probably all understand fairly well, but he just went crazy over this. He's replying under every message I make, but for some reason he won't debate about it.
Yeah, people are fucking scared to debate.
Yeah, I don't know what he's supposed to...
Where's that swamp pussy at, man?
Yeah, I want to get the swamp communist.
Show up. That guy fucking said he would show up.
Did you tag him on Twitter?
I did.
Let me see. Let me see what post you tagged him in. Maybe we can boost it.
Like I DM'd it also.
Oh, you did? You DM'd him and he agreed to it?
Yeah, he can see my DM.
Maybe you should make a tweet. You should make a tweet with maybe a screenshot of the DMs and mentioning him, asking him where he's at. In the meantime, if anyone else wants to debate us on anything, we are open to any debate of any kind. We'll never turn down a debate. And, if you're respectful to us, we will be respectful to you.
We need to get a debate.
Yeah, once it gets a little bit more, we'll start.
Look, he's here. Swamp ass is here.
Perfect. Hey, Swamp Communist, what do you want to debate us about?
What the fuck? What did you want to debate me about? I fucking asked you first.
You like the Conley House, right? You like the Conley House?
I don't know a lot about it. Seems all right.
I have an idea. You have a lot of disagreements with so-called patriotic socialists, right? So since you have really strong disagreements with so-called patriotic socialists, by the way, we're just Marxist-Leninists, but that's what you call us. Why don't you go ahead and explain what's so wrong about the idea of Marxist-Leninists being patriotic in America? Explain why that's not possible or why it's wrong.
So, in general, being patriotic as a socialist, there's nothing intrinsically wrong about that, right?
But as an American,
and being in a settler state, in theory, you could maybe be a patriot, but the shit that I see coming from people who call themselves patriots in America is just tailism. It's just appealing to the elements of bourgeois patriotism that are a part of the reaction against actual proletarian class interests.
Okay.
So there's no real reason to co-sign it when all I see from that so-called patriotism is tailism. So there's no point to it.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a response to that. So you say that all you see from the patriotic, so-called patriotic socialist camp is tailism of bourgeois tendencies and sentiments. But I think we've stressed this very, very clearly, not only in theory, but also in practice, that our patriotism is anti-imperialist. And anti-imperialism is the exact opposite of a bourgeois sentiment, because imperialism today is the primary contradiction, the contradiction between American unipolarity and the rising multipolarity that's being spearheaded by China is the principal contradiction of our time. And so because in America we've made this connection between patriotism and anti-imperialism, it's the exact opposite of tailism. And not only have we said that in theory, but I can prove this to you in practice, what we've done. We actually started out when we created Infrared debunking a lot of the narratives about Xinjiang in China, for example. We started out debunking a lot of the narratives that were coming from the State Department and from other leftists like BreadTube and Destiny and all these kinds of people. We were debunking those narratives. We were at the forefront of a political movement to debunk these imperialist narratives. We've always been that way, and that's always been our position. Now, with the special military operation happening in Russia, we also were at the forefront of debunking Western imperialist bourgeois narratives condemning Russia based upon lies. In fact, Haas even got banned from Twitch for being an anti-imperialist, for debunking these neo-Nazi narratives that were being pushed in American social media. So the idea that we are just parroting bourgeois sentiment is demonstrably untrue, and we've even been banned for the fact that we were promoting an anti-imperialist proletarian position.
So anti-imperialism is good. That's not the only aspect of politics in general. I mean, I know you're saying that it's a primary contradiction, and it is. But when you're using like this quote unquote patriotism shit to peddle like homophobia and transphobia.
We've never said anything homophobic or transphobic. And if you can show us an example, go ahead. I'm talking like an influencer, like someone like me or Haas or Caleb. It would have to be someone like them, right? So
Caleb Maupin literally talked to transphobes, and he's like, "Oh, there's good arguments on both sides."
Wait a second. Talking to transphobes is not the same thing as being transphobic. Secondly, you're not listening. Caleb Maupin, no. I heard what you said. I'm going to respond. Secondly, he's come out. He's been very clear on multiple occasions that he supports the rights of transphobes to identify as what they are, to identify of transsexuals to identify as what they are. He's been clear that he supports that. He just says he doesn't 100% understand it because he himself is not transsexual. He basically says this is not a topic that he's like going to delve too deeply into because
he literally let
it's not really his business.
He didn't push back against anything.
So you don't understand how human communication works. When you're talking with someone and you agree with them on some things, you don't agree with them on other things, but you think a political alliance might be valuable. You don't find every single point of contention as one that you have to go all out and argue about.
Someone says
it's not. Yeah. Here's the thing. You have this idea where you have to be responsible for what other people believe. That's not actually true. It's your business what you believe.
You're not listening.
I am listening. I'm telling you.
No, you're not. Calm down.
He's not responsible for the beliefs of someone else. That's just blatantly untrue.
Twitter space. This is a Twitter space. You can calm down. It's not that serious. Okay.
So, do you have an argument? Do you actually have a good argument? Because it doesn't seem like you do.
So calm down. If you calm down, I can say it.
So wait, why do you think I'm not calm? Wait a second. Why do you think I'm not calm? Is it because I have a loud voice? Is it because I'm a loud black man? Is that why you think I'm not calm?
No, it's because you're a man-child.
No, I'm not a man-child. Prove that in any demonstrable way. Prove it. Go ahead.
I'll send you the empirical study of why you're a man.
Okay, so basically all you do is talk out of your ass. You haven't been able to definition of me. Yeah, I talk loud. I've always talked loud. That's just who I am. I'm not even yelling at you yet. I'm honestly not even upset at you yet. So if you can't deal with the tone of my voice, I think that just shows a kind of weakness on your part. Do you have like hearing problems, or do you maybe have like spiritual, psychological issues that stops you from being able to like actually deal with the bare minimum of confrontation and discussion?
How many holes does a woman?
Oh, that's such a great argument. That's such a great argument.
Answer the question.
So you just conceded. No, you just conceded because you pivoted away from a political discussion to a discussion about a women's private part. You just conceded.
Stop dodging the question. You can't answer the question.
I can't. What do you mean I can't answer the question? The question's not relevant
right now. No, answer it.
No, I don't plan on talking about women's anatomy. I plan on talking about politics. If you can't stay on the topic of politics,
I'm sure you know nothing about women's anatomy. Yeah, you know nothing about women's anatomy. That's pretty obvious.
That's such a great own. Yeah, it's so cool to know about women's anatomy. That's just riveting, isn't it? I'm not a woman. Why is it? It's not. I'm not a woman. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. I will not be in a medical situation. Like, what is the point of that? I'm literally not a doctor. Do you think I'm like a gynecologist? I'm not.
You don't have to be a doctor to know this. It's pretty simple.
I don't have to be a doctor to know this, but I do have to be a doctor for it to be like pressingly relevant to me. It's just not pressingly relevant.
Ruka, you have fucking anime as your profile banner. You get no bitches, dude. Quit like lying right now. Get the fuck out of here with that shit.
You're a fucking
idiot.
You know, Ruka, why are we even talking to you? I actually want to hear what Swamp Communist has to say because honestly, he's more relevant than you. So, I mean, what are you even doing? Why are you even here? What is your point here? Can you just like make your point clear so we can move on? All right. Now, what were you saying, Swamp Communist? You said you had examples of us being
what were we even fucking talking about?
This place is stupid.
You said that we were like peddling homophobia and transphobia. That's what you said, right? Okay, yeah, prove it.
I mean, like I'm not going to go through all my fucking mentions and look for someone with like a monkey and sun emoji being a goblin.
Yeah, but here's the thing. No, here's the thing. I mean, like, show me a time in which Haas has been transphobic or homophobic. Show me a time in which I have been homophobic or transphobic. Show me a time in which Caleb has been.
Yeah, Haas. Yeah,
show me a time.
Haas is when he was making fun of the were army.
That's not transphobic at all.
He was fucking pronoun jokes in general.
Pronoun jokes. Wait a second. I know plenty. Wait a second. I know plenty of trans people who make jokes about pronouns who think it's stupid. That's not transphobic. Like what pronouns you like the putting your pronouns on Twitter. Like that has nothing to do with transphobia. Are you gonna actually show an example of him like denying the reality of trans people or something along those lines, or are you just gonna say, oh, he made a joke about were? army. Like is that really all you got?
So there, you brought up Caleb Maupin a second ago, right?
Yeah.
So one, Caleb is anti-abortion.
No, he's not. He's pro-abortion. He said so on Twitter, and I can prove that. I can show it.
He fucking
He said that multiple times.
Caleb fucking talked about how
he's pro-choice.
Like
he's literally
people should be okay with him being anti-abortion because Stalin was anti-abortion.
No, that's not what he said. That's not what he said. Here's actually what he said. He didn't say that he was anti-abortion because Stalin was. He was saying that if you think you can't be a communist while having a different opinion on abortion, that's just not lining up historically with what some communists like Stalin have believed historically. He didn't say he himself was against abortion. So you're just jumping there, and I can show you tweets. But wait a second. I can show you examples. Do you want me to just settle this and show you an example?
Because even that argument is completely removing like the historical context behind why there were abortions.
But it's not an anti-abortion argument. It's not him saying that he's against abortion. That's not what he's saying there. And I can prove that by showing you. What about? Actually, when Roe v. Wade was removed, Caleb actually got criticism for being pro-choice because he has a lot of more conservative fans. And he told them that he was pro-choice, and he's pro-choice even if he's going to be criticized for it by some of his fans. That's how you know he's authentically pro-choice, because he doesn't even have anything to gain from it. His fan base is not going to like him more for it, but he still says he's pro-choice. So that's not even true. That's just not true.
All right, you're just going to deny stuff.
So do you want me to show you the tweet? Do you want me to? Okay, do you want me to find the tweet? Because I can find the tweet. Do you want me to do that?
Dude, I'm sure you can find a tweet of him pedaling back on shit after he gets dunked on for it.
No. Wait a second. It wasn't. He wasn't being attacked. Actually, he just said this affirmatively himself. Right when the controversy happened, he said he's He said he's pro-choice. That's just he wasn't being attacked. He didn't say that as a reply to someone else. He said that right when the controversy started. And if you give me the time, I will actually find the tweet. And I will retweet it, or I'll post it, or something along those lines. Okay, do you need that proof? Because I can show you that
he has at one point.
Right after Roe v. Wade was removed. So right in the middle of a huge controversy about abortion, he said it was pro-choice. It wasn't just once upon a time. It was very recently, and it was in the middle of a huge controversy. So are you just going to continue lying, or will you admit you were wrong about that?
No, dude, fucking patriotic socialists are super reactionary all the time.
You tried to give an example, wait a second. I want to stick to this. I don't want to stick to this example. Let's stick to this example. Will you admit you were wrong about that example or not?
About
yes. No, but he's literally. I've literally given you proof. I've given you undeniable proof.
I'll give you an even better example.
I gave you proof. I gave you undeniable proof. Do you deny that proof exists? Do you deny that the tweets I'm speaking about exist? Do you deny that? So you admit that they do exist and that he did say he's pro-abortion. So now, how do you get to the conclusion that he's not?
Do you deny that he has said that he is against abortion? Do you deny that he's said that he has a difference of opinion, and that because of his religious beliefs that he doesn't condone abortion?
Oh, I don't deny that maybe personally he does not believe in abortion, but I do deny the fact that he's against abortion politically. He's pro-choice. He's 100% pro-choice. What does his personal beliefs matter? You should be able to have whatever personal beliefs you want. That's not even connected to his socialism. That's just connected to his religious beliefs.
Your personal beliefs are. That's a pretty useless distinction.
No, it's a really important distinction, because that distinction is precisely why he's pro-choice, you fucking idiot. It's why politically he would actually agree with you on abortion despite personally not agreeing with you. If you don't understand the distinction between politics and personal beliefs, you literally don't know anything. That's just the most basic distinction ever. If you literally don't know anything if you don't get that distinction.
Okay.
Okay, are you conceding?
What the fuck is his name? The guy in Austin, the one who always wears cowboy hats.
Keaton Mansfield?
Yeah.
Okay, first he doesn't live in Austin. First, he lives in fucking somewhere else. But
okay, so he's somewhere in Texas.
He's one guy. Who gives a fuck?
Caleb Maupin is the actual leader of the CPI. His beliefs are the most representative of that organization. I said from the beginning, he has people in that organization who are more conservative than him. But the fact is that he himself is not he himself is pro-choice. I mean, you deny that he's pro-choice?
This guy calls us a cult, but he wants everybody to universally agree. Like, what's the point of a communist party then if everyone fucking agrees on everything? You realize that, right? What's the point of a communist party, swamp ass? If nobody fucking disagrees.
You realize that, like, when Lenin was building the popularity of the Bolshevik Party, they worked with people who had a lot of different reactionary beliefs. That doesn't mean that he himself was reactionary. There's a distinction between Caleb's own views and the views of CPI and the views of people who are associated with them or who are fans of him. They're not one and one the same thing. I mean, Lenin even went to organize the Black 100s. I don't think you really know much about history. If you think that so-called reactionary cultural beliefs are a barrier to being able to work with people, organize people, you just don't know how political organization and work actually happens. I mean, how do you think the unity between the proletariat and the peasantry was able to happen without being able to work with people who had so-called backwards cultural opinions? I mean, you realize that during this time in Russia, the peasantry had plenty of backwards, even racist and nationalistic views, and Lenin still worked with them and even still says that the peasantry was vital to the proletarian revolution, that the proletariat would have to gain leadership of the peasantry. These people that you consider to be wait a second.
2022 that we should be able to have like parties with racist and nationalistic people.
That's not wait a second. That's not actually what I said. That's not actually what I said. That's not actually what I said. So I say something and then you say I said something else.
Why are you talking about it?
Well, no, I'm saying
bringing it up.
I'll tell you what I'm saying. I'm not saying that they will be in the party, but that the party must gain leadership of people who have reactionary beliefs. And yes, that might be racist, it might be nationalist, it might be sexist, it might be homophobic, etc. Yes, the party's going to have to gain leadership of people who have beliefs like this towards better beliefs. I think the way in which you actually deal with racism, for example, is not by canceling racist people, but by building a working class alliance between the different nations in America based upon their common opposition to the American deep state. And based upon this alliance, they can start to see that these disagreements and these cultural differences and these tensions that they have with each other are not actually fundamental. That they're not actually fundamental. That they can work together as one people.
No, I agree with that. I mean, that
is our position. So that is our position on as far as dealing with racism and so on goes, and these kinds of problems. That is our position. So it seems like you're agreeing with the so-called patriotic socialist position. That's very interesting. I've even wrote articles about this. I'm sure we agree.
I'm sure that we have a lot of fucking like crossover with each other when it comes to theory. I don't. You keep on talking about like what you guys do in practice. But as far as I've seen, like the most material practice I've seen from like CPI or from fucking like Infrared Collective is that you guys had like a private like convention at a hotel one time in Austin.
I have an example of some practice. Do you want to hear it?
Sure.
Okay, so in Nicaragua there was an election, and America at the time was denying the legitimacy of the election. Caleb Maupin and CPI went there to be observers and put out vouch for Nicaragua that these elections were valid and were truthful and were honest, posted pictures, etc., and so on, and combated the imperialist narrative. So that's practical work that Caleb Maupin CPI has done to fight against American imperialism, and I'm guessing that's probably more work than you have done. To fight against American imperialism.
Nobody has done more praxis than fucking Caleb on the whole internet. So what are you talking about?
If all you guys have is like Caleb running around as like
it wasn't Caleb, it was CPI. It was Caleb and his organization.
What's wrong with that? Caleb's our guy.
So now if we want to talk about Infrared has not been around as long as Caleb has been around. We've only been around for about a year and a half or 2 years, and we only really gained popularity about a year and a half ago. Caleb Maupin has been around for like a decade, so it's easier to look at his record and see how successful his project has been. He's one of the people who helped organize Occupy Wall Street. He has a long history of organizing protests, good journalism, etc., and so on. So to say that the so-called patriotic socialists don't actually have any good examples of practice, that's just completely and utterly untrue. Now, as far as Infrared's practical project, our project is to take over the CPUSA. And when we do so, we will probably be, you laugh, but we're doing it right now. And in a year's time, when there's a national convention, when we gain power, we will likely purge you. very, very likely purge
I'm
you.
not in
Unless
the CPUSA.
You're not in the CP. Thank God you're not. Thank God you're not. But if you were in it, if you were in it, we would purge you. We're gonna purge people like you. Let's put it that way.
Dude, Leon Trotsky he's smiling up at you guys from hell right now.
How are we related to Leon Trotsky?
You're fucking describing Trotskyist entryism right now.
There's nothing Trotskyist about entryism.
What?
No, there's not. There's nothing Trotskyist about entryism. You realize that
Trotskyist
no, there's
right.
not. No, there's not.
Thank you, Henry. I think that's all I needed out of this.
He's leaving.
You guys have been excellent.
We beat him.
So are you conceding? Do you have an argument, or are you gonna like concede and leave?
I'm conceding to the genius Trotskyists of CPI. You guys are.
There's nothing inherently Trotskyist about entryism. There's nothing inherently Trotskyist about entryism. The idea that entering into a party, following democratic centralism, and then winning the elections is inherently Trotskyist. It's just really stupid. That's just really dumb. That's inherently Trotskyist. That's stupid.
It literally is a fucking it's a tactic invented and co-signed by Leon Trotsky.
Yeah, it's a tactic that Trotsky used, but the idea that it's inherently Trotskyist is stupid. So now, because Trotsky did this, it means you can never enter into a party. It means you can never enter into a party as a group to change the views in the party. We're literally following. No, wait a second. We're literally following the democratic centralist Marxist-Leninist line of the CPUSA, following all their rules and taking them over based upon their own rules, based upon their own Marxist-Leninist party constitution. So it would be better to say we're constitutionalists. That was so easy. That was literally so easy.
He has a soy voice too.
I was gonna say, like, I guess the fucking communists in China were fucking Trotskyists were entering the KMT back in before Chiang took over the party.
Yeah, there's examples of Trotskyist entryism, but that doesn't mean that all entryism is inherently Trotskyist. Just because Trotsky did, that would be like saying that labor organizing is Trotskyist because Trotsky organized labor unions. Or that's just stupid. Doesn't make the idea of it inherently Trotskyist.
Bro, he got defeated. Holy shit.
The whole debate was just him fucking. And
you know what's stupid about this too is that when Trotsky was doing entryism, he was entering into social democratic parties, right? And he was trying to move them towards further to Marxism and Leninism, right? But we're actually entering into a party that's already Marxist-Leninist, that's already formally speaking a Marxist-Leninist party. So it's not even comparable. It's not even the same plan.
All right, we got a new guy right here, JD Pond. What's your argument?
Yeah, I didn't really have an argument. I really just wanted to sort of learn more because I think there was a while back where I was in a space with you guys and I think I had sort of come in with a misconception of what it really is that you guys believe. So I had a couple questions. I was sort of wondering, with regards to the United States as like the imperial core and obviously the dominant capitalist power, sort of what your patriotism means and how it's sort of separated from capitalism and imperialism. And then I was also curious, what your guys' opinions are of the American Revolution, especially because, the way that I see it, one of the big causes of the American Revolution was the fact that, the settlers here in the Americas were angry at the British for not allowing them to settle west of the Ohio Valley and essentially colonize more land. So those were my two questions. And like I said, I'm here to learn more so than I am to argue. I hope that's okay. I know it's kind of a debate space.
Okay, so I wasn't really paying close attention, but here's my answer to the first question. As for how our patriotism relates to capitalism and imperialism. So I think when you say capitalism, you mean that probably more in a cultural sense. You probably just mean how it relates to the currently existing establishment and the big corporations and so on. Well, I would say that our patriotism is precisely hated by corporate America and by the liberal establishment and by the liberal deep state. If you actually look into the history of the CIA, you'll see that they actually promote left-wing ideas. Look in the Congress of, I forgot what it's called, but they actually have historically promoted left-wing ideas, anti-patriotic ideas, even anti-American ideas. So our patriotism is anti-establishment, and it is based in the popular strivings of the American people. For us, patriotism is a kind of default. It's the default in America because this is a real country. The people here have an determinate being. They have real national realities, and so love for one's country is the default. What makes us distinct is that we have the position that the true form of patriotism, the true form of this thing that is essentially fundamentally true, is anti-imperialist. In other words, the way in which you serve your country the best is precisely by allying with anti-imperialist powers internationally that are against the same American deep state that has been destroying and tearing apart and liquidating the American working class for decades and decades and decades. So for us, anti-imperialism is just the true form of patriotism. I mean, this is true. If you actually love your country and you want your country to be better, you're not going to want it to be sold out by Wall Street. You're not going to want jobs to be shipped out overseas. You're not going to want your economy to be rotted out by financial parasitism. And you're not going to want these endless wars that cost our tax dollars, cost our lives, and cost the lives of the people of the world to continue. I mean, you can even see this happening in the Republican Party. They themselves don't have any left-wing or Marxist beliefs that would cause them to be anti-imperialist, but because of this objective reality that I'm speaking of the fact that imperialism does not benefit America, especially not during our time. We even see people like Marjorie Greene Taylor fighting against the proxy war that we're fighting in Ukraine. You even see like dozens of Republicans voting down the bill to give money to support the neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Why? It's not because it's because of this same objective contradiction that I'm speaking of between the imperialist state machinery and the American civilization and the American people. Now, as far as the America's revolutionary history is concerned, so you say that one of the causes of the American Revolution is because the British wanted to stop expanding to the westward, right? Now, the British, yeah. So the reason why they wanted to stop doing this, it was not because they did not have long-term plans to conquer more westwards. It was not because they were morally better, etc. It was because they had enough trouble keeping control of the colonies they already had, and they knew that if they expanded more, there would likely be some kind of revolt. I mean, think about it like this: if you're just barely able to hold on to the land you already have, expansion is not going to be the smartest thing. It's not going to be something you're more capable of. But don't get it wrong. Most of the colonialist countries in Europe had plots for the rest of America. If America did not expand, it would have been Spain or France or eventually even England, right? So I think this is kind of not a really good contention here. And I think more fundamentally, the American Revolution was based in the fact that in America, there started to be a division between the people living in the American colonies and the people living in Britain. There is a distinction between the kind of political rights that the settlers in America had versus the political rights of the people who lived in Britain. And based upon this kind of distinction, this lack of sovereignty and of political dignity, that became the sorrel of a people's revolution led by the revolutionary bourgeoisie. George Washington and the founding fathers, etc. And I mean, this opinion I'm giving, it's not at all unique. This was the same opinion that Lenin had of the American Revolution. I mean, he called the American Revolution one of the great world historic revolutions in history. He called it one of the that's basically what he called it. He said it was one of the great world historic revolutions in history that was truly liberating, that truly liberated the people. So I think, and I agree with that position. I agree with Lenin's position on the American Revolution. Also, another point I want to make is this. I think that there's also this idea that the American Revolution happened because England was planning on ending slavery. I think that's a misconception. The reason why I think that's a misconception is because even in the Constitution itself, they still had it written into the Constitution that they planned on ending the slave trade by the early 1800s. Secondly, when Americans actually did fight another revolutionary war to put an end to slavery in the Americas, guess who it was who supported the South? It was British financiers. And I would even say that covertly, the British state supported the South. This is why when Marx wrote his letters to Lincoln and What About Lincoln and so on, he also wrote criticizing the British who were attacking Lincoln, calling him a tyrant, and funding the South. So I'm taking the same side as Marx and Lenin, etc., and Mao, etc., did in respect to American history. That's my position. It's pretty much the same as their position.
Yeah, I appreciate you outlining that. I really haven't read, what Marx and Lenin had to say about the American Revolution. So I'm looking at it purely from, what I have read as a socialist and also just like having studied American history, is that it seems to me like, yes, the American Revolution, like you said, it was led by the bourgeoisie here on this continent. But it also seems to me that while it liberated people from the political control of the crown, essentially we replaced the landed gentry, which was in, Britain calling all the shots, with the American bourgeoisie. But what I really wanted to talk about more so than that is sort of your desire to make life better for the working class here in the United States, while also maintaining an imperialist line. I think that, through the process of developing communism and dismantling imperialism, and this is just a prediction of mine, that the quality of life in terms of the amenities that we have access to at the prices that we have access to them here in the United States are going to become more scarce. They're going to become more expensive, and they're going to go away, and people are going to fall on hard times because of it. And at the same time, I think it's going to deal a serious blow to the national identity of America. I mean, something as integral as like our automobile culture, is going to take a massive hit when we no longer have access to the petroleum trade that the United States controls across the world right now.
Yeah, here's what I would say. So I think maybe you can make an argument that earlier on in American history, kind of like right after World War II, imperialism and these new global financial institutions that started to arise, like the World Trade Bank and the IMF, you may say that during that point in time, imperialism economically benefited the working class, because the whole point of these global financial institutions was first and foremost to guarantee that there was full employment in America. But I think after a certain point, imperialism started to have the opposite effect on the lives of regular Americans. Because instead of ensuring full employment, we actually started to see the loss of jobs due to globalism and, basically the way our financial system has not brought jobs to America. It doesn't bring jobs to America anymore. It ships jobs overseas. And I think one of the most important things for an economy is obviously going to be what kind of jobs you have. Now, as far as access to products, to cheap products and stuff. So, yeah, maybe in some cases you might have. Well, actually, I don't even think that's true now, because, I mean, look at the way things are now. We already have rising prices that are like skyrocketing. And it's not because of imperialism. It's not because of anti-imperialism. It's because of imperialism. I mean, look at the way that American imperialism in Ukraine has made gas prices skyrocket. So I think really it's demonstrably true that the opposite is going on. I think that we can replace a lot of the global trade relationships that we have right now, which are not benefiting America, with win-win trade relationships. I mean, even Trump, and like I said, Trump's not a leftist, Trump's not a Marxist, Trump's none of that. Even he was criticizing all of the NAFTA and TPP and all these trade arrangements that we have. I think we can make better trade arrangements. We can still we can not only import products for a decent price, but we can also start exporting products again. And I think we need to become an exporting economy again. We can reindustrialize that money that's being spent on war, and it is a crazy amount of money that we are spending on war. Countless dollars that we're spending on war. We literally borrow endless amounts of money from other countries just to fund our wars. Imagine if even a portion of that money was going to building up the American economy, if it was going to building American infrastructure, which would make industrialism more cheap and more possible again. If we were building up the infrastructure for a new industrial revolution, imagine if we were doing that. Imagine if we were producing things again and creating more jobs. I think that before we can actually even have a decent economy again, before we can have a working economy, we have to start investing domestically in our economy and not in these wars abroad, and building up the actual infrastructure for industrial manufacturing, etc. These kinds of jobs in America. So I think it's the exact opposite now. There are some favorable relationships that we have because of imperialism, like some cheap products or some like monopolies on trading certain agricultural products and stuff like that. That's true. But what that means is that there's going to have to be a restructuring and a changing of how our economy works. But I think that this kind of growing pain will be good for America in the long term. I mean, there's a reason why you have an entire section of the Republican Party now that is every now and again taking anti-imperialist stances. It's because what I'm speaking of is not just my personal opinion. It's an objective reality. And you see the more populistic aspects of the political apparatus responding to these objective realities. There is a contradiction between imperialism and the American people. My central thesis is this. It's not that the American empire benefits the American people now. It's the opposite. The American empire has come at the expense of the American people. And as far as the American way of life goes and the American identity, it's precisely the American empire that is the greatest danger to the American identity, because they're trying to replace the American identity with globalism. They're trying to replace the American identity with liberalism, with liberal values, with woke values, and with globalism. You don't see any expression of authentic Appalachian values. You don't see any expression of Midwestern America. You don't see any of that in the media. You don't see any of that. You don't see anything like that. All you see are these universalist, liberal woke ideas and values and cultural norms that are being pushed by one small section of the American elites onto the majority of the American people. And now the American people have become so terrified by the culture war, by the cultural the cultural counter-revolution that's been led by the leftists are at the forefront. They're terrified of this. They don't feel like they can even say what they want to say without a threat of being fired or bullied or harassed, etc. So I think as far as America's cultural identity goes, I mean, it is precisely the elites that are trying to destroy it. They want to take away the family. They want to push all these new ideas about how the family works and et cetera and so on. And obviously, I think it's fine if a private individual wants to live in a way that's not traditional, but they're trying to push that onto the people as a whole collectively. And it's destroying and uprooting American traditions and the American way of life.
Yeah, I guess my response to that would be, at what point in time was the American tradition, the American identity, and the American way of life not informed, supplanted, and built by either colonialism here on the continent or imperialism through resource acquisition abroad? And then how do you expect to, I guess, yeah, my follow-up to that would be, whatever time periods or elements you choose from, how do you then expect to sort of go back to that, without reinforcing the imperialism that I see as kind of integral to that identity? Because it kind of is, because without the continental colonialism here and the imperialism abroad, like I said, the American identity simply wouldn't exist. So, what time period are we going back to where that didn't happen, and then how are we doing?
So here's my response to that. I think that first I have to kind of like give you my own view on how history works and how history develops. So I'm a dialectical materialist. So I look at history through the lens of the unity of opposites. So for me, the fact that American history has resulted in and has happened due to all kinds of violence, colonialist violence, later on imperialist violence, and so on, and the fact that an American civilization, a new American identity is arising. These two contradictory things, they have a unity for me. It's precisely through this barbarism that something else, something different, something in contradiction to that barbarism was able to arise. So just because one thing arose from the other do not mean that these two things are the same. In fact, quite the opposite. What I'm claiming is that from one thing arose its opposite. So despite the dark origins of the American identity, this does not mean that the American identity itself is in any way shackled by those dark origins or identical to those dark origins. It's something else entirely. On the one hand, you have this colonialist violence. On the other hand, you have a world historic democracy, a republic. You have a republic being born. You have the first anti-colonialist struggle. I mean, Anti-colonialist struggles across the world have taken inspiration from the American Revolution. Across Latin America, they've taken inspiration from the American Revolution. Mao Zedong took inspiration from the American Revolution, studying George Washington in depth. So the idea that just because the American identity arose from colonialism means that it always must be attached to colonialism is wrong, because from one thing, as I said, arises its opposite. I mean, that's just dialectics. So what I'm claiming is this, is that in our era, you have imperialism, you have the American empire, and you have the American people. And these two things have, objectively speaking, come into contradiction with each other. So in other words, the essence of America has come into contradiction with the form of America. And this is how revolutions happen. It's when the essence comes into contradiction with a form. And so a new form must arrive to revive the essence. So even if there was a kind of harmony of the essence and the form in the earlier days of American colonialism, where one gave rise to the other, we're in a situation where that harmony is broken down and it's given rise to a contradiction. And America is not unique in this. You also have something similar with Russia. With Russia, you also have a history of settler colonialism. The Russians expanding eastward. I mean, how do you think Russia became the largest landmass in the world? But by the time you reach Lenin, Russia is, one, not only an imperialist power, but two, also being harmed by British and French imperialism and financial parasitism. And so they come into contradiction with what you would call their own history. And so a new form arises to revive the ancient essence, the old essence. This is a common dialectic throughout history. Now, as far as America specifically, I also want to make specific America. But another point I want to make is that I don't think colonialism and imperialism can be equated. You say, give me a time in which American identity was not forged by either colonialism or imperialism. Well, colonialism and imperialism are just not the same thing. They're not. They're really, really very, very much different. The only similarity that they have is the fact that they involve immorality and violence toward foreign people. But that's not actually what's essential about imperialism. What's essential about imperialism is the rise of finance capital, of monopolies, and of early state planning.
I agree.
Yeah. So I want to separate the two things. So actually, in America's founding, the founding fathers, especially George Washington, they were isolationists. So their tradition, this isolationist tradition, actually comes into conflict with American imperialism and American expansionism off the American continent. So this era of American imperialism and now American dominance all over the world, that's completely in contradiction with the founding fathers, with the American Revolution, and with America's isolationist tradition. I mean, in fact,
I'm sorry to cut in, just a follow-up question to that point. So then how do you reconcile things like the First Barbary War, which occurred about 10 years after the founding of the United States, as well as things like the Monroe Doctrine, which essentially asserted American control over the entire Western Hemisphere and was one of the cornerstone documents that shaped the American identity? Yeah,
so my reply to this is that American isolationism, the view was more so not isolationism in respect to America. I mean, we all know there's a Western expansion and also American expansion into Mexico, et cetera, and so on. It had more so to do with Europe specifically and against the outside of the continent. That's what the isolationism was in respect to, was the American continent. Basically, the founding fathers, Washington especially, wanted to keep American hands out of the kind of the wars that were going on in Europe. Because here's the thing, the opinion in America of Europe was basically that in Europe you have these petty nations that are always engaging in wars, always competing with each other, etc. And America wanted to stay out of that. Now, the fact that this historically ended up not happening later on, et cetera, and so on, that just means that America was suffering from an internal contradiction. I mean, there's also the fact that America was supposed to be based upon the freedom of all humans, right, of all men, right, the rights of all men, but there was slavery. So there are these contradictions between what America was supposed to.
The rights of all free.
So why would you point that out when I literally just? I literally just pointed that out. I literally just pointed that out as a contradiction. So why would you just be repetitive like that? If I just said that was in contradiction with the fact that there was slavery in America.
I'm saying that the American identity was never built on that universal.
No, you don't get you literally don't know anything. You don't know anything. Okay, this is so stupid. Yes, it was built upon it was built upon the universal rights of men. It was built upon the Constitution.
Tell me
in the
when.
Constitution. You're stupid, but
Tell
you don't know. You don't understand. You want to know why? You want to know why people were excluded from that? It's because they weren't considered human.
Tell me. When was it universal?
What do you mean, when was it universal? It was universal from the beginning.
That it's based on universal rights of all men. When was it universal?
From the beginning.
Free white land-owning men, owners of capital.
No, it doesn't. The Constitution does not say. Wait a second. No, the Constitution.
You just called.
Wait a second. The Constitution.
Yelling, and then you pick them off the space, and then you claim you won.
Listen.
I allowed you.
Listen. You allowed me to keep talking. I'm not allowed you to keep talking. You little bitch. You don't allow me to do anything. I allow you. I allow you. I allow you. I allow you. You're literally on my space. I've been respectful to you so long, but because you can't take the time for me to explain why a single thing you said is stupid.
You haven't said a single thing that's factually
Yes, I have. I've literally said everything that's been factually accurate. You don't even know. You don't even know about the quotes. You literally admitted yourself that you were not familiar with Marx's view on the American Revolution. And
I was putting on a fucking act, you stupid.
So you couldn't. Yeah, you couldn't. So you just. So you were. Wait a second. You were acting by admitting that you don't know something. So if you know about it, what's your contest? How do you contest Marx's view? How do you contest Mao's view? How do you contest Lenin's view? If you were not actually ignorant about it, how do you prove that they were wrong? How do you contest their views? In what way can you meaningfully say that Lenin's view of the American Revolution was wrong? Do you actually understand it? Do you understand why he thought this way about it?
Can I ask something?
Did that guy just leave? Did that guy literally just leave?
Let me ask something.
Second. So the thing that guy got so upset about, it's really simple. In the Constitution, it actually does not say all white landowners. It says all men. America was founded based upon the idea that all men were created equal. This is what Thomas Jefferson said. All men were created equal. Now, guess what? Guess what, though? There was slavery. And you want to know what's so scandalous about the fact that he got so upset about that? Is the fact that I literally was bringing up the Constitution and these early statements and the Declaration of Independence and all this stuff for the point of stating that there was a contradiction between what America was in theory and what it was in reality. That was literally my point. So he got upset over something that was not even a point of contention. He literally got upset over something that was not a point of contention. I was making the same point he made, which is that while in theory it was these were rights that were universal to all Americans, in reality they were not. You want to know the reason why they were not universal, by the way? It was not because it was all white land-owning men. It's because Black people and probably many Native American groups were not considered human. That was the source of this justification for slavery, was that they said that Black people were not human. That's literally just basic history. They didn't say that, oh, we're not actually applying this to all humans. They said that, oh no, these people are not human. That was so like if he's just given me 20 seconds, 10 seconds to finish my point, he would have like understood that. I honestly don't get it. I don't get why someone would get so pissed off when I'm saying something that's not even a point of contention. Like Rev, Prism, you can unmute yourself. Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, I literally was making the same point he was making, which is that in theory it was universal, but in practice it was not. So why was he upset about that? Why?
Yeah, I get the point you were making. I feel like, I don't know, like he literally interjected with random nonsense about the Barbary Wars for no reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, and it's not even that. It's like when he got so mad, it was like because he wanted to say, oh, it wasn't all men. And it's like, yeah, that's the point I'm making. It was all men in theory, but not in practice. It's literally the point I'm making.
Like he was moralizing a lot of shit. Like, I don't know, going back to the Barbary Wars point, like he viewed that, like to use that as an example, like he viewed that as like, oh, it's bad that America attacked like some foreign country, when the whole context for that was because there was piracy going on. American shipping was being raided and all that shit.
It's so stupid.
Like, I don't know.
It's really so stupid.
I cannot comprehend like really basic historical facts.
I gave him so much good faith. I literally gave him so much good faith. I gave him so much good faith. Why? Why did I give him so much good faith? It's like you try to, Haas was right about the what do you call them? The malformoids. He was right about them. Like, why?
Yeah, the malformoids.
Why do we
yeah.
always give them such good faith? It's like I gave them such good faith and gave them such a long dialogue with them, only for him to just spurge out, just completely spurge out. It was not all. It was like, what was he? What was your point? Yeah, we know that not all people in America had rights at that time. Like, is that really your grand point that you're getting so upset about? We know that. We know that. That's common sense knowledge. Anyone who's read a history book knows that. Anyone who's gone to school knows that. Is that really his great point? I wonder if he's one of those people that thinks it's just like imperialism is just war, because he kept up on bringing up all these wars and shit that happened before imperialism even came about. Like, colonialism and imperialism are not the same thing. They're completely different eras of history. The problem is that these people look at history more moralistically. They never think about things in terms of the mode of production. When Lenin talked about imperialism, he was actually talking about a stage of the capitalist mode of production. He wasn't just talking about bad things that happen to people and places.
No, in his view, imperialism is when like big country attacks small country. Literally, that's all it fucking is. Like, oh my god, America attacked like fucking Barbary pirates, dude. Holy shit.
It's so stupid. It's literally so stupid. All right, someone else wanted to talk, right? Someone else wanted to debate, I think.
We have Ruka.
Right, Ruka.
Is Ruka a debater?
He's a reoccurring. He's not really a debater. He's more like a stupid guy that comes on and like yell at us sometimes. I'll let him have his piece. Okay.
No, I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have an actual question here. So you said that the American people don't benefit from imperialism. Right?
Yeah, that's what I said.
So I guess I disagree with this. I guess because don't the Americans benefit from having like surplus extraction from the global South? Like the economic imperialism of America does benefit the Americans by having cheaper goods, right?
The primary basis of imperialism since the 1970s has not been the surplus extraction of wealth from poorer countries or from Latin America. It's actually been the debt that's been taken from first world countries like Europe and so on. But here's the actual nefarious thing. Instead of that debt being those loans being taken from the European first world countries and from Asian countries being put to work in America, the vast majority of that money actually goes to funding wars. So the vast majority of the money that America actually makes from imperialism, it does not go into domestic planning or spending. It goes into wars that don't produce wealth, but destroy wealth and also destroy American lives. And secondly, sometimes they don't just destroy American lives, they also hurt the American economy. Like, for example, the proxy war that we're funding in Ukraine has in a very demonstrable way hurt the American economy. It's raised inflation rates. It's raised the price of gas greatly. It's probably the reason why the economy, or it's probably a big part of the reason why the economy decreased in the first quarter of this year. So I think this idea, is false. Also, secondly, the most important thing for an economy, it's not going to be just, cheap goods do matter, but we don't even have that anymore because of inflation. But the most important thing for an economy is jobs. And if you actually look at the way in which American imperialism functioned in the early days, the primary function of post-World War II American imperialism was always to guarantee full employment. But somewhere along the lines, the people who planned American society had a different plan in mind. And you had an era of deindustrialization. You had an era of deindustrialization.
Like the fact that we have iPhones made cheaper in China. Like don't Americans?
That's not American imperialism. The fact that iPhones are made cheaper in China, that's the reason why China's been out competing us. That's not imperialism. No, wait a second. That's not imperialism. That's just because China. Wait a second. No, that's just because China produces goods more efficiently.
No, but the expansion of finance capital into the world, that's imperialism.
That's part of imperialism. But like I said, it's actually the opposite. The primary financial basis of imperialism has not been American investment in the third world, like investing finance capital in the third world. It's been a debt. We don't have so originally when imperialism first came about, like in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, imperialism was based primarily off of loaning poor countries, making these predatory loans to poor countries, right? But wait a second. But after World War II, and even more specifically after 1971, after the Vietnam War, imperialism, the basis of imperialism was no longer primarily predatory loans into third world countries. That still happens, but it's not the primary basis. The primary basis of it is actually European loans and Asian loans to America. So America is a debt country, not a credit. America's a debtor country, not a creditor country. America's like financial realities are based upon debt, not credit. You see what I'm trying to say here? Like America actually takes more loans than it gives out. It takes more loans.
I see what you're saying. I feel like there's some, like, for example, the reason why America wanted to coup in Venezuela is so we could get cheaper oil. Like, I think America still does this to, like, get cheaper goods from the global south, right? Like in Venezuela, for example, or Bolivia.
Yeah, but you know, we could also have cheaper oil if they just gave Venezuela, like, a better deal in general. If we stayed out of Venezuelan politics and we actually came to a good agreement with them, we could probably have far cheaper oil than we have now. Wait a second. But another thing, wait a second. And this is even more true when it comes to Russia. Imagine if we didn't antagonize Russia. We could have way cheaper oil. I mean, we had cheaper oil like very recently. Like the price of oil has gone up because of our desire to bring Ukraine into NATO. So, you know, we can also reduce the price of some of these goods just by actually making win-win fair trade deals. And the way we've been going about things has not been successful. The price of oil has not been going down because of imperialism. It's been going up because of imperialism, like right now. Another thing that I want to mention is that, so America's investments into foreign economies, and a lot of these investments since World War II were through the mediums of the IMF and the World Bank. So in most cases, they left these countries distraught. They tried to use this as a way of controlling the sovereignty of these countries. But then in some cases, American investment and global investment actually ended up helping these countries, because a country like China has a strong sovereign basis and also was building up its own national industries. And so in a way,
Like Botswana?
So wait a second. So in a way, this kind of more classical imperialism in the case of China ended up being anti-imperialist, because it helped give rise to an anti-imperialist power, China. So you have to think about this dialectically. A thing that's bad in one way can sometimes be good in another way, unintended. That was the case with American investment in China. So when you speak of like getting cheap goods from China, it's like that actually benefited China in the long term, not America, because now we're not the ones producing and selling things. We're not the ones with good jobs. They're the ones with good jobs, and they're the ones with a rising and healthy economy, et cetera, and so on.
I don't know if it was necessarily good for the Chinese workers, because a lot of their industry got privatized during this investment era.
So actually, when you say you don't know if it was good for the Chinese worker, I think it's really easy to demonstrate that it was good for the Chinese worker. If you speak to any, now this is incidental, but I'm going to give better evidence later on. If you speak to any Chinese person, like someone who lives in China, they will say that their generation has been far more wealthier than their parents' generation, and you can even see at a visible pace the increase of wealth. Like in the past, a poor person in the past, decades ago, might be a middle-class person in today's China. There's been a demonstrable increase in the wealth of Chinese workers. Wait a second. I'm not quite done. I'll let you go, but I'm not quite done. Other thing that I want to say is that the Deng Xiaoping era is over. We're now in the Xi Jinping era, and there's actually a direction that China has in respect to this problem of cheap labor, right? So in order to deal with the problem of cheap labor, the direction that China decided to go into was development of high tech or mid-end technological manufacturing. And so they want to go in the direction of Germany, basically, of producing more high-end goods. By doing this, they're also able to increase the wages of their workers. And they have this plan called Made in China 2025. It's not limited just to 2025, but that's like their first benchmark, their first goal. And this also goes along with the Belt and Road Initiative, because with the Belt and Road Initiative and the economic prosperity that will be built up in the countries that China is like building infrastructure in and doing trade with, this will increase the amount of countries that are actually able to buy China's goods and China's more expensive goods that it will be producing later on. So this problem of cheap labor in China that's already something that the CPC has addressed and is like, that was just a stage in China's development. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I guess the thing that, like, coming from like a more Maoist perspective, don't you think privatization is a contradiction when it comes to like class relations, like relations to the means of production? Like when your industry is privatized, you no longer have social production in the same way.
Yeah,
that's like my critique.
yeah. So here's what I would say. I think a lot of people like misunderstand Mao and Deng. They think that Mao and Deng are at odds, but I mean, in reality, Deng Xiaoping was a student of Mao and spread the teachings of Mao Zedong thought. So I don't think that this contradiction is as big as people really think it is. In fact, it was based upon the industrial base that was built up by Mao that allowed for Deng Xiaoping to form an opening period to actually work. Now, addressing the specific point you make about privatization, so in China, even in the Deng Xiaoping era, you didn't just have like just a private industry that's able to do whatever it wants. It's actually the industry in China is still actually, in the last instance, under the direction of the CPC and the People's Republic of China and their state planning. I mean, even now today, all the land in China is owned by the state. There's a hard limit on what you're able to actually do with your own private companies. Like a private company in China is not the same thing as a private company in a classical capitalist society, because it already takes for a baseline the fact that the policies and the state planning, the 5-year plans of the CPC take precedence over everything. That's why China has been able to direct these private industries towards fulfilling the social ends that it has set up. So here's my theory about China. It's not that China went away from socialism, became less socialistic due to privatization. China became even more socialistic due to privatization, because this allowed for them to plan the economy in a much more intelligent and bigger way, because this privatization allowed for more market data to be fed into the hands of the CPC. And that data allows for them to create more intelligent, more refined, and even state. That's why, for example, Xi Jinping was able to manipulate the private Chinese market towards uplifting the great majority of the Chinese people, and was able to embark on the greatest anti-poverty campaign in history. So I think you have to sharpen your understanding of what socialism really means. Because you're thinking, I think, of more so Soviet-style socialism, not Chinese socialism with Chinese characteristics. And Mao Zedong, this socialism with Chinese characteristics, by the way, it comes from Mao Zedong. Even in his writings, he says that socialism will have to have Chinese characteristics. It will have to have national characteristics, I think is how he put it. And the Cultural Revolution, which was promoted by Mao Zedong, is precisely what led the way for the end of these Soviet biases in the old Soviet style of socialism. Because the Cultural Revolution was in large part against Soviet influenced bureaucracy and intelligentsia in China. It was kind of the spiritual stepping stone that Deng Xiaoping would need to even be able to exist in the first place, if that makes sense.
Well, I see that. I think you're kind of mixing up the two eras, though, because what you're saying about the state planning, that's a bit more recently, because even Xi Jinping talks about this. Corruption used to be a huge problem in the party. Like, Xi Jinping is cracking down on it. But, like, after the Deng era, corruption was a huge problem in the party. So I don't necessarily agree, like, under the Deng era. Like, maybe the Xi area, but I don't think you could say that.
Well, here's what I would reply. Here's what I would say. I think the Deng Xiaoping era was definitely a necessary step in China's goal of building up the productive forces. I do think it was still a more advanced kind of socialism, and it did still have state planning. The market was not just like a wild capitalistic market. It still was directed by the CPC. Now, as far as the building up of corruption goes, yeah, corruption did build up in the party, especially during the Zhu Hintao era. During that time, it definitely did build up. But I think that's kind of something that happens a lot with communist parties. I mean, I do not deny that there was a lot of corruption in the Communist Party. There's even still right now a lot of corruption in the Communist Party.
Well, Xi is mostly cracking.
Yeah, he's cracking down on it, but it's like I mean, it's like even in the USSR, right? There was corruption in the Communist Party. So I'm not disagreeing with the fact that there is corruption. I'm not disagreeing with that at all.
So to me, this shows like multiple contradictions still remain in the party. Like if you read about the new China left, you see that there's multiple different visions that the party wants to go in. There's still sectarianism that has to.
Well, here's the thing. I think in some ways. So here's the thing. The Communist Party is not just like one ideology. As you said, it has a lot of different sects, a lot of different groups, a lot of different political tendencies within it. And on the one hand, there are liberal tendencies, which I do think have to be cracked down on. And I think Xi Jinping is cracking down on the more liberal tendencies within the party. And also just because of the failure of liberal democracy with the 2008 financial crisis. And again, with the, the COVID crisis in 2020. And even right now, I think the liberal side, the liberal tendencies in the party are being really beat back by reality itself and by Xi Jinping. On the other hand, there's also a lot of different political ideologies and ideas within the Communist Party that I think may interact with each other and kind of build up more interesting theories and ideas. Like there's a lot of great thinkers within the CPC and related to the CPC, and not all those ideas have to be discarded because they're not the exact ideas of Xi Jinping. I think this era of 21st century Marxism will be to some extent heterodox, and we'll have to combine the different visions and ideas of a lot of these great Chinese thinkers. It's really the more liberal influences within the party that I think have to be combated, and the more globalist, more pro-American influences in the party that have to be combated. There doesn't have to be ideological unity entirely. There's always been in the history of the Communist Party, there's always been ideological division. If you a person who I think talks about a lot about this is someone that I always recommend to read is I think he's the guy in the CPC that's kind of influential when it comes to deciding Hong Kong affairs. His name is I'm not going to pronounce it correctly, but it's Jiang Shigong. I probably pronounced that wrong, but he writes about how the political neutrality of the Communist Party, the fact that it's neutral in the sense of acting in accordance with the will of the people and the best interest of the people, is in part it's not because the party itself has one ideological line that's completely in line with the people. It's because between all these competing interests in the party, you have a kind of neutrality that forms as a kind of reconciliation of it.
You're talking about the mass line, like the will of the people, in that sense.
Yes, but also just in a very common sense way of of just benefiting the Chinese people. When he says that the Chinese Communist Party acts neutrally, he means that it acts towards the benefit of the majority of the people consistently.
Yeah, I guess I can see that. I just see
the reasoning for this
people like Jack Ma, and
Well, I think Jack Ma does not really have that much influence. I don't think he really has that much influence in China, because you'll see whenever he gets out of line or goes against the direction the CPC is going in. I mean, he'll disappear from the media for weeks or months, and people wonder about where he's at. I don't really think he's a pressing threat. I do think that figures like Jack Ma in the future will become less and less relevant, and less and less. There'll be less and less of them. And I think that's kind of going to be part of the Xi Jinping era and the crackdown on corruption. It's going to be.
I'm pretty sure they have allowed billionaires into the advisory board of like the NPC.
Yeah, but if you think about it, that's a way of controlling them, because if they're in the CPC itself, they're also subject to the CPC.
So you mean like in order to subvert the national bourgeoisie?
Well, here's what I'm trying to say. I think the national bourgeoisie, it's more or less under the control of the CPC. They are in the CPC, but they're also under the control of the CPC and the dominant political line of the CPC. The Xi Jinping tendency, and they're historically they were kind of used to build up the productive forces of China. I think that now we're coming into an era in which these national bourgeoisie are becoming less and less relevant to China's success, and over time, they will disappear. I don't know when, but I think they are on the way out as far as the long-term trajectory of the party goes.
Well, even looking at the 2050 plans, I don't think China has any plans to, abolish the private market.
Well, they don't need to abolish the private market. I don't think they need to abolish the private market.
Well, they said they want to achieve socialism by.
They're already no. Here's the thing. That's the thing. I don't think that they're like building up for socialism, like transitioning to socialism. I think they already are socialist.
Then what is 2050 about?
2050, they're just moving to a higher stage of socialism.
Like so they're on the primary stage of socialism, but they're moving to a higher stage.
No, I think they're beyond the primary stage as well. I think you may be able to call the Stalin, Mao Zedong era more so the primary stage of socialism, and this the Deng Xiaoping era of market socialism, I would say, is even more advanced. And with Xi Jinping, I think we're even moving into another era of socialism, which is kind of a crackdown on the corruption and the bourgeoisie and so on, the elements that maybe grew a little bit too fat under the Deng Xiaoping era. Like the way I look at it, you don't go back in time, right? So a lot of people think of it like this. They'll say, okay, the Soviet Union was socialist in the Stalin era. China was socialist during the Mao Zedong era, but then after Deng Xiaoping, China stopped being socialist. But it's if they're like favorable to China, they'll say it's building up the productive forces for socialism eventually, or they're in a lower stage of socialism. My view is that China is actually in a higher stage of socialism than the USSR was. I don't think you go back in time. I think you only go further. I think they're actually further along as far as socialism goes. They're more advanced.
Well, I'm pretty sure, according to Deng, the primary contradiction in China is the inequality between rural and urban areas, no longer class struggle. Like, this is why they had this huge crackdown on poverty, because that was the primary contradiction of China, which was the inequality between rural and urban areas.
Yeah, but if you think about it, that kind of is a side of class struggle. Because what is the contradiction between the rural and urban areas is also the contradiction between the peasantry and the city bourgeoisie. And the peasantry is the peasantry in general. I think the history of communism has shown us actually aligns with the proletariat. Also, with Xi Jinping, I think you start to have more of a focus on the proletariat specifically. Again, from what I know, their language has started to shift a bit more towards speaking of the proletariat.
Well, you have to proletarianize the peasantry to go to a higher stage. Obviously.
Well, no, it's not. It's not. It's not. It's kind of the opposite, actually. The way in which socialism works is not that it proletarianizes the peasantry. That already happens because of capitalism, because of industrialism. That's kind of an objective process that's going to happen. I think what socialism actually does is that it takes the proletarianized peasantry, the proletariat, and it allows them to become a new peasantry by giving them a new basis, by giving them land. By giving them land in a home, et cetera, and so on, and all these like social guarantees. They basically become a new peasantry. They no longer have only their labor to sell. They have roots in their own country.
Yeah, okay. Well, so between the peasantry and the proletariat, that's a contradiction. It's not antagonistic, but it's still a contradiction.
Well, the contradiction between the peasantry and the proletariat is this. You have the peasantry. Originally, you just have the peasantry, right? And maybe you have some people in the cities. But the peasantry, in the process of industrialization and the rise of capitalism, they become proletarianized. They start to lose their land, and they're forced into the cities to get these jobs at manufactories, and so they become proletarianized. And now you have socialism, and you have communism, and the communists believe in the proletarian revolution, the proletarian dictatorship, or the dictatorship of the proletariat leading the peasantry. But what I'm trying to say is that precisely what the communists is leading the proletariat through is to becoming a new peasantry, to becoming a new group with a solid, even institutional basis in the country. The whole point of communism is that we don't want the proletariat. The whole point of communism, in a sense, is to quote unquote abolish the proletariat or sublate the proletariat. When communists sublate classes, it's not just the bourgeoisie; it's also the proletariat, which is sublated.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I got another one more thing. So, do you see? So, I do think there's been a contradiction with China on imperialism. I do think China has become more neutral on imperialism. So, let me explain really quickly. First of all, they've normalized relations with Israel. And second of all, if you have noticed recently, when it came to the Ukraine issue, China was neutral. They abstained from the vote. They didn't take a hard stance. So do you think this is an example of them becoming neutral on imperialism?
So here's my stance. On the Israel thing, as far as I know, they've never really, like, on an economic trade basis or on a military basis, et cetera, they've never really opposed Israel. They've always traded with Israel. They really...
Well, Mao funded the rebels.
Yeah, but that's just. I think that's just a different era in Chinese politics. Okay, here's the thing. I'll put it this way. I think that the current Chinese position as far as foreign politics goes is pretty much not an interventionist. They'll work with pretty much any government in the world, and they won't really intervene in the political struggles going on in different countries. Now, during Mao's era, there was a conflict between Chinese socialism and Soviet socialism, and also America. And so all three of these countries were interfering in other countries and kind of fighting all these proxy wars and so on. But that's just not the era of Chinese international relations that we live in anymore. For a long time, it's been the president to work to trade with Israel and all this stuff. Now, as far as Ukraine goes, I think China staying neutral in respect to Ukraine is actually genius in a way, because I don't even think Russia would want China
Why be neutral on imperialism?
No, yeah, but I don't think it's neutral on imperialism. I'll explain. Just let me get through the specific stuff first. So as far as, because they are neutral, like literally neutral when it comes to Ukraine, at least as far as diplomacy and like politically, what they're saying politically goes. But I think this is actually genius. It's because on the one hand, on a diplomatic level, they're able to maintain ties with Ukraine. They're able to trade with Ukraine. And this is good for Russia because I don't think Russia actually wants Ukraine to become more impoverished, et cetera, and so on, or to be cut off completely from China. I really don't think Russia wants that, because if that happens, I think the Ukrainian nationalists may even gain in power, and the Russophobic tendencies will probably increase. And also on the world stage, this kind of diplomacy makes it harder for America and so on to push back against China. In the meanwhile, though, China, I'm pretty sure China is either the biggest or one of the biggest trade. It's probably Russia's biggest trade partner, or one of Russia's biggest trade partners. And also ideologically, internally, they're very pro-Russia as far as their social media. And the direction they kind of influence their social media to go in. So they're kind of playing I think they're just playing a different game. It's not that they're neutral on imperialism. They're just playing a different game. In the case of Russia is politically challenging the U.S. Directly, and challenging the legal and international precedent set by the last couple decades of U.S. intervention. China, on the other hand, is not challenging America directly politically yet, but is instead challenging America economically, and more so long term. By the building up of the Chinese economy, this poses an imminent threat to American unipolarity. Same with the existence of the Belt and Road Initiative, because as China builds up its economy more, and also as China takes steps like Made in China 2025 and a lot of the other steps that China started to take during the Xi Jinping era. Xinjiang actually has an article about this, all the steps that China's taking to make itself more independent from America. It poses a threat to American unipolarity on a material basis, on an economic basis. And so you have this unity between Russia's political threat to American unipolarity and China's economic material threat to American unipolarity. And it's the unity of these opposite approaches, the short imperialism. And I think also, as far as American imperialism goes, it's like Mao would say, it is a paper tiger. I think
Well, have you read Mao on coexistence? Like, he would combat this idea of peaceful coexistence in a revisionist sense like this.
Well, I'm not talking. What do you mean peaceful coexistence?
Like his essay on peaceful coexistence.
Yeah, but here's the deal. But wait a second. It's not China's. I think you're missing what I'm trying to say. It's like imperialist America will not exist. I think the problem is that you give American unipolarity too much credit and think it's more established than it is. It's actually falling apart. And it's falling apart because of China. It's not that China will coexist with the American empire. It's that China will outmode the American empire economically. So it's like, you see what I'm saying? It's like China's own domestic policy poses an economic threat to America. That's why if you read I don't really read them myself, but just from listening to Samira Khan, what she said, like reading these kind of like papers that Congress and all these intelligence institutions and so on, right? They always say that China is the biggest threat to America, and they act like that politically too, because you'll see both the Democrats and the Republicans, they both hate China for the most part. China's really posing the biggest threat economically. So I don't even think it's coexistence. They can coexist with America as a country, but not as a global empire.
Okay. Well, that's all I got for right now.
All right. Well, that was a pretty good discussion. I'm glad we can talk like that instead of the usual. Well, if anyone else wants to debate, they can go ahead. Yeah. You can go ahead if anyone else wants to debate us. Feel free to come on, and we will debate you. We probably only have a couple hours to go because around 9 o'clock, Haj is going to be debating that weird doctor guy. So we're going to stop a little bit before that. But if anyone wants to debate, they can debate me.
Is Prism still there?
Yeah, Prism is still here, I think. He might just be muted.
Yeah, I'm here.
Bro, where's August? August usually is the one who finds us all the debate people, all the people to debate, because he DMs them. He has them all DM'd.
Okay, so I'm on Twitter right now, and I'm reading this constructivist guy. This is at Liabav Pop. This guy, he's still tweeting about me right now. Instead of getting in this space, he's literally still talking about me on Twitter. It's so weird. It's like, Either just debate me about it or just stop talking about it. Like, what does he want from me? Is he just gonna reply to me indefinitely on Twitter? He's not even replying to me anymore. He's replying to other people about me now. Like, what does he want? Why is this guy in the I don't think he's even in the call, is he?
No, he's not.
That's just so spineless.
Yeah,
That's just so spineless.
Leftists are antisocial. Leftists are like antisocial.
Like I would not even I would have a calm discussion with him if that's what he wants. I mean, I just had a really respectful discussion with that other guy. If he's respectful to me, I'll be respectful to him. I don't see what's like the problem here. Let's let August come on. I see you just requested. Man, my phone is bugging out sometimes. I need to get me a new phone.
August, bring on some people.
Do you think I have like leftists on speed dial? Who do you think I am?
Yeah, you do.
The fuck? Like, I don't know any of these people. I went to their space. I went to like 2 spaces right now to see what they're talking about, and they're talking about like something about nationalism being like nice or whatever. I don't know. Like the good kind of nationalism, like the Cuban Revolution, and they're talking about like how I don't know, some stupid shit. And then another one where they're talking about how Zionism is like anti-black or something. I don't know. It's just kind of confusing. Anyways, everyone subscribe to the new branch of communism, Sweatshop.
What? What do you call it?
Sweatshop.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hold on, there's a couple haters in here. I can see them. I'm gonna invite
All
them.
right.
Put them on, dude. Listen. I want to debate someone. Okay, pull up. Literally pull up. I haven't spoken to a leftist in a while, so if you are a leftist, please pick up the thing. Apply to speak.
There's that Montia person, and whatever their name is. They're like a big hater. They're a hate stalker.
Yeah, pull them up.
Pull up to the debate chat.
Go through people's profile pictures. Go through their bios. If they're weird, get them up here.
Yeah, I'm doing that right now. But the thing is like, it seems that most people here are based, but most people here are based. Shout out to everyone listening.
Yeah, I think we have mostly fans here right now. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of good that on like a relatively peaceful space, we can still get this many people.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's a really high level of engagement.
We got like 70 people in here. Hey, what's up, Holto?
Okay, we got 2 people speaking, some shit like that. God bless Russia. Okay, how about God don't bless Russia? I don't know. Enemies, we need enemies. If you're a liberal, if you're a leftist, if you
He's like fine with this, but he's not a communist. So could make an interesting discussion. I think he's from conservative, right?
Wait, what do you say?
You're like a conservative, right? You're not a communist.
Who? Me? You like me, Henry?
Yeah.
That's Henry.
Oh no!
That's not Pete. That's not Pete.
No, that's someone else. Okay.
What the hell?
Wait. I want to debate Rev. Rev, why are you against my communism sweatshop theory?
Because you're asking to get ratioed. And that's really what that is.
No, listen, man. What's your actual problem with my new ideology?
You're asking to get ratioed.
Listen, man. Listen. Explain to me how like sweatshops are not like indigenous forms of like labor organization.
You just call it indigenous forms of
Honestly,
Yeah.
You're kind of right. In a way, being against sweatshops is like Malthusian, bro.
It is.
Like
because if you're against sweatshops, if you're against sweatshops, you're like literally doing. You're basically like a first worldist. You want to like impose your like labor organization on like the third world,
Because in a way, natural progression of things. Like if you look at 1800s like era labor in the first world, it's pretty similar to how sweatshops work. It's just like the natural progression of things.
Precisely so, which is why we need the sweatshops, right? So, Rev, explain your contention. Like, why are you coming at me?
No, I'm just saying you're about to get ready.
Okay. I know you guys are joking, but I'll explain. I'll explain. I'll give a good contention on that. All right. So
okay.
You're right. Sweatshops are pretty much the kind of like the way that the form that industrialization takes it first. And in the third world, I mean, sweatshops are obviously very common. In China, they used to be pretty common. But I think that's just an earlier stage of industrialism, right? I mean, I think you don't have to be against sweatshops. It's just that as an economy develops and becomes more wealthy and more prosperous, it's going to start producing. It's going to start producing more higher end, more expensive goods, or it's going to basically have to change its economy so that it can provide its people higher wages. I mean, that's what's happening in China with China Made in China 2025. So it's not really something you have to be for or against. It's just something that's going to naturally, I think, over time, go away or change form or become more advanced. I think that's just kind of what happens.
Yes, I think you basically said like what Prism said, which is kind of like this understanding of sweatshops as like a transitionary stage. Within the development of a nation.
Yeah, it kind of is.
It's not
necessarily something.
It kind of is. Yeah. It's not an ideal. It's not an ideal, but I think like we can very much like use it to troll like the anti-land back people, or so the pro-land back people.
Yeah, if you say
with protecting indigenous BIPOC labor, forms of labor organization from these first worlders who have never worked in a Look, sweatshops, we can even like take it at an aesthetic level, okay? Like pull up Hegel, pull up like whoever talks about aesthetics a lot as a philosopher. And honestly, they're kind of cozy. If you've been to a sweatshop, I have been to plenty of them, and they're kind of cozy. They have a nice vibe. It's very communal, right? Maybe.
Would you say it's kind of indigenous?
It's very much indigenous. It's very much BIPOC. It's very much gender queer.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yo.
It's very much.
A sweatshop isn't communal. Neither is a.
Dude, we're joking. We're literally joking. It's not like you're taking it too seriously. We're joking.
Listen,
we're trolling. We're trolling.
Sweatshops, they're very diverse. You have a lot of people from different ages.
Wait, the guy said that it's not.
Wait a second. I want to have a serious discussion, actually, because I kind of like this guy. I think we talked last time. Do you want to talk some?
Yeah. He's interesting.
Yeah. Do you want to talk more about? We can talk more about the USSR or something if you want to.
The only reason why I like Russia because number one, they aren't communist anymore. You guys know that. And I don't know how you guys convince yourself they are.
We know. No, wait a second. We know they're not communists anymore.
That's why they're successful now.
No. Actually, when they went from being communist to being like so-called capitalist or whatever, this was like one of the worst eras in Russian history. When they were under Yeltsin, that was one of the worst eras in Russian history. Now, under Putin basically saved Russia. He didn't make Russia communist again, but his government is largely going in the direction of what the Communist Party wanted. I mean, a lot of the political decisions that he's made over the course of 22 were spearheaded by the Russian Communist Party, by the KPRF. So I think Putin, while not being a communist, is a step closer to Russia's communist legacy. Whereas Yeltsin, which was really an anti-communist and basically doing the work of Western capitalism. This is one of the worst eras in Russian history. I mean, death rates skyrocketed. It was just terrible. Crime rates just went out of control. I think the problem with communism in Russia, I think it started with Khrushchev. It started to become more clear and explicit under Brezhnev. You had the Brezhnev stagnation. And then in Gorbachev, obviously, it fell apart. I think the problem, though, was that they went away from their Stalinist legacy. They went away from instead of going in the direction of Mao, which was the Cultural Revolution, instead of revolting against the party bureaucracy. And in Russia, the party bureaucracy became dominant and basically went against the legacy of Stalin and eventually ruined the country.
Don't you guys think that Russia is a spoiler for these globalists? Like Russia, I'm sure Putin went to, these globalist institutions and talked to these people, see if he can make some kind of connection with them. But then I think he finally figured out that people are fucking nuts. Like Western Europe is becoming more right wing and more ultra right wing, even Nazi. I mean, if you look at the Finland, for example, they participated in killing like 1 million Russians. They sided with Adolf Hitler during World War II, and up until 2020, they still have the swastika on their military gear. I mean, there's a huge Nazi problem in Western Europe, and I think Russia is going to help eliminate that. These guys are a fucking problem.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Then the weird thing too is that like in Europe, the right wing, like the far right, like the Nazis, are allied with the left in America, because it's even though it's odd, you'll notice that it's like the liberals in America and the leftists in America who seem to like support these Nazis in Ukraine the most.
Well, I think these guys are pushing for nuclear war, putting their feelers out to the general public, and they're basically advertising through like CNN and these other media outlets that a nuclear war can be won, but it can't be won. These guys are out of control. They're like cultists.
Yeah,
Well, here's the thing.
they are. They literally are. They are insane. They are insane, and they seem to be pushing for a nuclear war, and we've gotten dangerously close to that.
Now, have you guys heard that the Ukrainian government asked for nukes on the eve of the Russian invasion into Ukraine?
I did not know that, but I mean, actually, I think I did know that. Yeah, that's kind of crazy though. But hey, is this default?
Yes, this is default.
This is the infamous default.
This is the notorious infamous default. Yeah.
Do you still hate us or whatever?
No, I never hated you guys.
Oh, okay.
I have criticisms, but I still like overall support you guys.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess that's cool. We haven't talked in a while. It's kind of surreal. You're a little bit of a celebrity
on
in
Twitter.
our community.
Yeah. I bet.
So, how have you been?
Well, my server just got fucking nuked by a rogue admin, so it's not going well.
Oh, that server is gone now?
I'm trying to rebuild it, but this particular person also claims to be behind the nuking of the infrared server.
Who is this person?
But I don't know how serious. Tupac.
Oh, yeah, that person. Honestly, I don't know if he's telling the truth or not. Because it's just really hard to say. It could be anyone, really. But yeah, I've seen that person around. What was I gonna say? So, what are your plans politically? What do you plan on? Like, you got any plans or ideas or goals or anything?
Well, here's what I'm trying to do. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I think you muted yourself for a second.
Yeah. So, in light of the increasing censorship online, is that the conventional model of spreading content online is less and less tenable, because it's going to be too easy to shut down like these singular big platforms like on Twitch or on YouTube or just it would be so easy for the corporations just to like ban Haz or Hinkle or Moppin off Twitch. So I think what's going to need to happen is that the online Patsaw communist community has to. I can hear an echo, so it's a bit distracting. But the online Patsaw community have to organize themselves online and find ways of circumventing censorship. Probably like create all sorts of alt accounts in order to manually spread content.
So I'm gonna be honest, Default. I really did not listen to anything you said. I was kind of distracted, but I think what you're getting at is that there's a new wave of censorship, and the old ways of media are probably not going to work forever, or they're probably not going to work really soon. I would agree with that. I think House talks about it a lot. We're gonna have Web 3.0, and I think in the end we're gonna have to have platform independent media. I think one of the big goals of Infrared is to eventually be platform independent, to where we will be able to have a big audience even without platforms like YouTube and Twitch and Twitter and so on. In the long term, we need to build a website that's strong as that Fuentes website. We need a website that's that powerful, that has thousands of guerrillas, all on our own independent platform that can't be censored. And I think that's going to happen. It just takes time, but we have been working towards that since basically since the conflict in Russia happened, because it was really after the conflict in Ukraine happened, the special military operation, that the censorship really got bad. Like, we got banned from Twitch, we got banned from Discord. It's really crazy, the censorship. And another thing you notice too is, like, when all this censorship happens, you just have so many snakes. I'm not even going to name any names because why give it attention, right? You just have so many snakes that just come out to attack you while you're being censored and deplatformed by social media. It's crazy.
The building of a website is that's a great idea.
Yeah,
that's definitely something that has to happen. But what I'm talking about is that there's already so much of there's so many people following, people like Moppin or Haas or Hinkle. But then, like, their activity online essentially boils down to consuming the content, maybe like participating in the online communities and spaces, so. But what I'm proposing is that these people can organize themselves in order to try to combat the sorts of suppression and, like, the algorithmic censorship or just the actual, like, blatant censorship, in order to essentially manually boost hanky content.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. You're basically saying that we need to be more organized and, like, basically have, like, groups of people that are just, like, manually liking stuff to, like, boost the content that we're producing. The thing is, and I don't know how to say that. Well, I don't really know what to say. It's like we do function as an army. We do we already function as an army. I think that maybe the difference between our approach to building an army and maybe your approach to building an army is that we see that you can't use force for all of it. Some of it just takes, like, ideological fervor and just authentic strong support. And so when we, like, use force in our community, it's more so to just build this authentic fervor as opposed to, like, in a very manual way, completely discreetly organizing everything, because there is still just, like, the violent, chaotic nature of reality that you can't really get rid of. And as a materialist, it's the interaction between this chaotic reality and our human plans and our organization and so on that we have to reconcile. So I don't think you can ever, like, fully manually plan everything out. But on the other hand, yeah, we are working as an army. We are organized. And yeah, I mean, think about it like this. I mean, I literally have an account with 791. Basically, I have like 800 followers, and I get more likes than people who have like thousands. Like, I easily get like 80, 100 likes. And I used to just get 100 likes. So we really do have a lot of power for our level of following. I mean, look at the space that me and Rev are hosting. We have just as many people as Swamp Communist, even though he has like 16,000 or 17,000 followers. For our level of size, we have an insane amount of engagement. I think right now, actually, our struggle right now, and what we have to do is we have to complete this stage, this stage of development from being an army into crossing the bridge of mass appeal. And I think we started to do that on Twitch before we got banned. Even like Haas was getting like 1,000 viewers and stuff. We were kind of starting to do it. But then we got deplatformed from a lot of stuff. And we gotta continue that bridge between the army and the popular mass appeal. And I think we're gonna have to rebuild a little bit more before we can do that. But eventually we're gonna shoot off like Jackson eventually. But it's gonna take time, because the difference is, I think like Jackson's audience is maybe more like People's Party, Jimmy Dore kinds of people. And I think on the other hand, with our audience, we're building more we're building a different niche, really, a niche that is smaller, I guess you could say. So I think it might take a little bit more time, but I think eventually we can make this gap between the infrared army to the mass appeal. And I think instrumental in that will be taking over the Communist Party, because once we take over the Communist Party, that will prove to everyone that we do have a kind of legitimacy. It will prove that we do have a kind of power, right? If you have the power to take over the Communist Party, that proves that this is not just a media collective, it's a serious thing. It's an objective victory that can't really be denied. And once you unite organization, the Communist Party, with information, the infrared media collective, I think we can really build something powerful. I think Haas said in one of the streams before, our goal is to have someone from the Communist Party in Congress by, I think it was 2026. If we can do that, we will be eternal.
What do you guys think about the PCUSA?
Let me tell you. Yeah. So here's my opinion on the PCUSA. I think we don't really know what's going. I think most people don't really just know what's going on with the PCUSA. And honestly, I don't 100% know what's going on with the PCUSA. Ideologically speaking, they seem to be all right. I think I don't really know a lot about them, but ideologically speaking, they seem to be all right. And from what I hear, they got expelled from the Communist Party. They were kicked out from the Communist Party. What they're doing now, though, I think it's kind of in the shadows. And let's just say I have some interesting hidden information relating to them that I can't really talk about in public at the moment. Let's just put it this way. That's more of a conversation for privacy than public.
Right. From my understanding, their history was that they were trying to.
There's only one Communist Party that claims legacy for all communists.
Yeah. To make it clear, yeah, there is only one Communist Party. But the question is, where does the PCUSA stand in relation to that Communist Party? Like I said, I just don't want to say anything in public. But yeah, we will take over the CPUSA. The CPUSA is the only Communist Party. There's a lot of other leftist parties out there, but there's only one party that can claim to be the party of the proletariat. That is the Communist Party. There's only one Communist Party, historically speaking. It is the only Communist Party. And we will take it over. We're going to expel the liberals. We're going to get rid of the Democrats in the party. And we're going to unite the party with the authentic strivings of the American working class and the American people and masses in general. That's our goal. That's always been the singular purpose of infrared, to revive the.
There's never been a revolution without a strong arm in the background, without men with rifles and violence.
So here's the thing.
Even the American Revolution.
Yeah, but here's the thing. The thing about like this, you can't really talk about that in public. That's how you just get feds watching.
Yeah, that's glow talk. That's cool.
I'm not calling for violence. I'm saying history says that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. I think that here's what I think, though. Here's what I think about as far as like violence and revolution goes. I think first there will be some kind of objective failure of the American state. And I think it's already emerging because the American state is becoming more and more in contradiction with the American people. When this objective political crisis happens and when legality and law and the legitimacy of the state is suspended, that's when it's time for a Communist Party to act. And that's when these kinds of revolutionary moments happen, historically speaking. There's usually some kind of objective political crisis, and then a party or an army responds to that. As far as being armed, in this kind of scenario, obviously we would have to be armed. No disagreement there. But like I said, it's not really something to really promote or talk about because it can be taken the wrong way.
No, we're just talking about history. We're not promoting violence. But what I'm saying is that's what history says. And I'm not saying you guys need to do that or I need to do that. All I'm saying is you just have to look and see what happened in the past. There's just even with Martin Luther King, there was a contingent of people in the background that did some violent acts to get the civil rights movement moved forward.
Yeah, we have this meme in our community, which is 1776, 2036. Yeah, I completely get what you're saying.
But again, if anybody's listening, I'm not promoting violence.
But anyways, it seems like we don't really have too many people that want to debate. So unless I guess I could talk about a few things. I could do that maybe for another 30, 40 minutes. Or we could also end the space. It's kind of up to you guys, whatever you guys are feeling.
I think we should keep it going.
All right.
We still got good viewers.
We do still have good views. I think I'm going to explain again the controversy about what I was talking about, the key to Stalinism earlier, that tweet that guy really latched onto so much. So I don't know. I think some of you probably were not here at the beginning of the stream, but I was telling everyone about this tweet that I made saying that Vipper's concept of popular monarchy was basically the key to Stalinism. And the idea basically here is that specifically Ivan the Terrible, he had a kind of democratic monarchy where, on the one hand, he was spreading local democracy through these charters that he was passing, which allowed the peasantry and the townsfolk to be able to vote on their own leaders instead of like just having a nobleman lead the town or the land or etc. So he was, on the one hand, he was doing that and uniting with the peasantry and the townsfolk. On the other hand, he was curtailing the power of the boyars and of the local nobility and landlords. And what I was saying is that this is actually pretty similar to what Stalin did. So on the one hand, Stalin united with the peasantry and the proletariat, especially the middle peasant. On the other hand, this alliance was directed against these corrupt party elites that were forming, and also against kulaks and other class enemies of the proletariat and the peasantry. So I was saying that because of this similarity, the key to understanding Stalinism is actually researching popular monarchy like Ivan the Terrible. And there was this guy who seemed to really disagree with me, and he just got really upset about it. But he didn't want to debate me. He just didn't want to debate me about it. And this idea of mine, it's very, very largely collaborated. It wasn't just Vipper who thought that Ivan the Terrible had a popular monarchy. There was also a lot of other historians who had that same position. As far as the connection to Stalinism goes, even Stalin himself, I think, implicitly makes this connection. I mean, he says that the only person in history comparable to Ivan the Terrible is Lenin. So I think it's that clear. But there's also a deeper wisdom here with communism, and this relates to like the topics of conservatism and progressivism. My theory is that communism is both conservative and futuristic. It's both conservative and progressive in a way, and because through modernity, through progress, industrialization, and so on, we passed through the liquidation of capitalism, which liquidates cultures and ways of life and so on, back into the essence of the past. And one of the ways in which we do this is the return of these so-called popular monarchs, but it's in a different form. It's not in the same form. So it's not actually in the form of monarchies, in the form of the dictatorship of the proletariat. And this also relates to what Haas is talking about in respect to the Asiatic mode of production and socialism. These Eastern socialist powers, in a way, what they're really doing is returning to their roots, their historical roots, to their post-Mongol roots. Kublai Khan and Ivan the Terrible and Timur and all these leaders. Socialism and communism is a revival of history. Through the future, the history returns even stronger. That's kind of the fundamental wisdom I'm trying to get at when I make all these kind of historical posts about Kublai Khan and Ivan the Terrible, which is that we are returning to history. We're returning to history. In the case of these like strongman leaders, liberalism presented a situation in which, for the first time, there was a kind of a lack of authority or a lack of power. Right, you just have this formally existing democratic government, and formally speaking, there's a vacuum of power. But secretly speaking, there's the deep state, and there's all these corporations and these elites and these institutions that rule us and that actually control. Communism, we get rid of this power vacuum that exists in the state and replace the deep state with the party of the proletariat, with the dictatorship of the proletariat. And this is basically what I'm saying. It's a return to pre-modern, rulers and monarchs, etc., and so on, in a new modern form. Does that idea kind of make sense to all you guys? I don't think it's as ridiculous as that guy really makes it out to be. I think it's very, very easy to support.
I think it's an interesting idea. But so how would you characterize the differences between these popular monarchies and like a dictator, like a DOTP socialism?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It's essentially speaking, it's the same thing, but they have a different form. So obviously, in the past, there really wasn't a proletariat in the same sense, right? The popular monarchy was kind of like the dictatorship of the peasantry. In the era of socialism, you have the peasantry starts to get uprooted from its land. It becomes proletarianized, and so you have the dictatorship of the proletariat leading the peasantry. The peasantry is still the popular basis of it. So it's different. Yeah, it's a different thing, formally speaking. But I'm saying essentially, it's the same kind of thing. It's a return to the past. And this is kind of a dialectical point. You know how Marx talks about? You know how Marx talk about the negation of the negation? So if liberalism was a negation of history, Marxism is the negation of the negation. And so you return to history, right? Kind of like a circle, but you don't return to it in the same form. You return to it in new form. The essence is revived through a new form. So the essence of the popular monarch is revived through the dictatorship of the proletariat.
That's like that's 1776. I talked about before. Exactly that. It's like the modernity negated 1776, but then Marxism brings it back. Essentially, it brings back the old republic.
I can see what you're saying, like in the sense that like basically imperialism basically negated the kind of authentic Republican revolution of 1776. And then 2036 is a negation of this, which revives it in a new form. Yeah, this dialectic of the negation of the negation, you can read that into pretty much anything. I mean, yeah, you can read. I mean, that is the dialectic. That is the dialectic. It's the negation of the negation.
Yeah, it's like we returned to being a republic. Like right now, we got trapped as an oligarch.
But here's what I would say. Here's another thing I would say is that. I don't think we're just going to return to being a republic, because even the republic itself is like modernistic, right? I think we're going to return to being a republic, but we're also going to have a dictatorship of the proletariat. And for me, in a dialectical way, the dictatorship of the proletariat will be precisely what defends the republic and the Constitution and the kind of like foundational freedoms and rights of Americans. Will be this dictatorship of the proletariat.
Right. That's how I see it. Yeah.
It will make the republic complete. 1776 was an incomplete revolution. The British still, I think the British intelligence still influences us a lot. And I think Canada is still a British outpost against America. 2036 and what we're trying to do will complete the revolution and get rid of British influence on American politics. I mean, look at the way they're trying to bring Meghan Merkel into politics. They want her to be president. They want the wife of the British prince to be the president of America. Think about how shameless that is. America as a country was defined by the fact that it revolted against Britain, by the fact that Americans believed that they were something more than just being British, that we have an authentic American culture on this land. That is not simply British. To have the British rule us again, I mean, what could be more shameful than that? And so I think it's, for me, the significance of being a communist is precisely to fight this people's war against British influences and restore the sanctity of our democracy. Big tech is taking away our rights. Big tech is taking away our constitutional rights. They're taking away our right to free speech. And the CIA and the Pentagon and all these intelligence organizations historically, they function in a completely undemocratic way. They're not accountable to anyone. They're not elected by the people, and yet they're doing all this crazy stuff. They're assassinating people. They're experimenting on people. They're influencing our culture. They have control over our media. If you look into the CIA files, you'll see that they've done extensive investigation into how to control the media and how to control and so on. They do control our media. You know what's really nefarious is that the CIA has studied Marxism so much. The CIA is very interested in Marxism and in socialism because since the 60s, it's actually been trying to use Marxism as a tool against communism. I know that sounds kind of contradictory, but you'll notice that in the 60s, they promoted all these left-wing organizations that were anti-communist, that were anti-Soviet. So the CIA has its hands in everything. My vision for America is we get rid of the CIA, we get rid of all these intelligence communities, and instead of this deep state we have, which is a web of media connections, the military-industrial complex, big tech, and the intelligence communities, we replace that with a proletarian party, the Communist Party, which will be answerable to the people, which will be out in the public, and which will be accountable to the people. And that's the only way to protect American democracy. That's the only way to complete 1776.
Based.
I'm still kind of upset that guy won't actually debate me, because now I'm stuck with this guy who's going to be tweeting at me. He's really bothered by this. If you just look through all my posts, you'll just see he's just there.
Dude, do you see their aesthetic? It's so disgusting.
It's very academic.
Yeah.
It's very. It's It is. It's abstract.
So is he like a? I was about to say he was like the Neomata guy who also gives off very, very big academic vibes.
I don't know if I know that guy.
The Neomata, the guy, the Bolivian guy, the guy that debated Haas.
Oh yeah, that guy. Oh man, his aesthetics are so bad because they're these cringe Like, it's just so cringe. Yeah, the Neomata guy has really, really cringe aesthetics. Also, the whole thing with like the land back thing is this: they're trying to do this thing where they're trying to combine patriotism with land back in a very weird way. Like they'll quote like William Z. Foster and Stalin and all this stuff, but it's all a gimmick, really, because if you look at all of his quotes,
that guy was okay with apartheid, right? Like I don't think he ever like took a stand against essentially indigenous apartheid. He seemed to keep on like justifying having an indigenous apartheid.
Neomata?
Yeah, Neomata.
I didn't watch the full debate. I didn't even know he went that far. That's weird.
Because he was talking about like how because Has would constantly push him on like whether he wanted basically 70% of like the U.S. to be under the sovereignty of like the indigenous government, meaning that tens of millions of non-indigenous Americans would be under the sovereignty of a tiny handful. And like instead of just like flat out rejecting it, like he would basically try to justify it by referring to the treaties.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. That is a kind of weirder part. That it's very strange. Like he basically wants the vast majority of non-Native Americans to be under the tribal rulership of like a really, really small percentage of the country. It's really strange. But I think really this whole thing, I think it's not even a serious ideological position. I think the whole point of that whole thing was just to divide our political tendency. And that's why he would reference Heidegger. That's why he would reference William Z. Foster. That's why he would reference Stalin. That's why he would try to like, in a way, pander to the people that we consider to be authorities, is because the whole point of it was just to divide the community. It was not even I don't even think it was a serious ideological commitment. Because if you notice, I mean, where did all that come from, right? Where did that whole thing come from? It came from a certain guy that I'm not even going to mention just because I don't want to give them attention. It was all a ploy to divide the community. And the arguments were just stupid. He would quote these people, and they would not even be saying the same things that he said. They would say stuff that everyone would agree with. Like, yeah, okay, of course, genocide is bad. No one disagreed with that part of your argument.
You know, I've like spoken to RevNats, and they don't even have that extreme of the position.
What is it? What even is a RevNat? What even is that?
Like revolutionary nationalists.
Yeah, but is it like a new thing, or has that like been around for a while?
Like I think they've been around for a while.
I see. Are they like kind of small, or are they bigger?
They're probably around the size of like the American Communist movement, but they're like communists, but they represent the like other nations, like Chicano RevNats.
Oh, okay.
Or like Puerto Rican and RevNats.
Are they actually like? Yeah.
And they don't even share like Neomata's completely extremist position on essentially apartheid.
Stupid position. I mean, the whole point of the whole like thing with his debate was that he was supposed to try to present land back in a more reasonable way. Yeah, he still ended up presenting it as being like something really extreme and insane. Like, did you see that map he presented where like 60% of the country would be under tribal rulership? That was his moderate. That was like supposed to be his moderate position.
Yeah. Well, what's his maximalist plan? Just straight up genocide.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's your moderate position. That's just crazy.
Dude wants like fucking. It reminds me of like German plans to like do Lebensraum, like Eastern Europe and shit, and like literally what this dude wanted, bro. It's like literally similar to fucking Hitler, right?
It really kind of is, because if you think about it, if like you're saying that a group of people, because of their bloodline, should rule over the vast majority of people who don't have that bloodline, it's like, what are we talking about? Are we talking about neo-feudalism? Like, what is that? Like, that does kind of have, like, that can have genocidal implications, even though he himself is obviously not advocating for genocide. But I mean, like, it is kind of weird if you're saying that, like, millions and millions of people should be under tribal authority. That's just really crazy. Also, another thing I want to mention is this. Something I really want to take credit for is we predicted last year, and we even said this in our video, that the land back stuff would be used for imperialism. We predicted that, right? And guess what? The Indian Collective this year is having meetings with Tibetan separatists to undermine China. We literally predicted that. And we don't get any credit for it. We don't get any credit for that when we literally called it.
Me and Etu think it's going to get even bigger. We think that land back is going to be the next like DLM tier shit in the coming like decade or so, in the 2020s.
I could kind of see it. It's kind of hard to say how far it's going to go, but I think the CIA definitely has its hand in manipulating Marxism, Leninism. Like, it's kind of a new thing because traditionally they would like manipulate these anti-Soviet groups, right? But now they're trying to manipulate the MLs. That's the weird thing. And this land back stuff is obviously a part of that. I think we kind of caught onto it really fast, though. So I wonder if that will have any effect on like the trajectory of this whole thing, because we really did like catch onto that thing, kind of smash it really fast. But I do think it could get big. It could get big.
The problem with like the whole land back thing is that there's so many different interpretations of it. Because like I've spoken with people who claim to support land back, but then if you ask them for a concrete like proposal for how they want to see like land reform carried out, they basically say, oh, it's basically the current reservation territories plus some more plus the land of some like rich fucking millionaire ranchers or something like that. So like a tiny part of the territory, not at all anywhere close to like 60 or 70% of the U.S. territory.
Yeah, and then at that point, why even call it land back, right? Like, why even be edgy about it if that's what you want? Because like we've already said ourselves that like, yeah, we agree that maybe some of the reservations should be given more land than they have now, and that maybe we shouldn't build pipelines through their reservations. But honestly, I think the thing with the pipelines is that some of those native groups want to build their own pipelines because they want to have their own industry and they want to have their own, you know what I mean? Like they want to have industry too. So, but yeah, I can. So these kind of like reasonable things, like most people I think agree with, but the land back thing where it's like we have to give all the historic lands of Native American tribes back. And some of these tribes don't even exist anymore. It's just like, it's literally not possible. It's not in any way pragmatic. And here's another similarity I want to make. I feel like the people who believe in land back are the same kind of people who believe in Mendelian genetics, because they're both based upon the privileging a dead essence. So in the case of Mendelian genetics, it's this idea that there's a gene, or as Lysenko puts it, there's two bodies. There's an ordinary body, and then there's a special part of your body which deals with inheritance and hereditary, the gene, and this carries units of hereditary. Now, the land back people have a similar thing going on, where instead of privileging the pragmatic needs of the real living people today, they privilege a dead essence, which is like the bloodline, kind of. It's pretty much the bloodline of the tribe or whatever, over in the dead letter of the law, over the living needs of people as they are today. It's the same kind of metaphysical position. And Haas made that point, but I don't think that guy really ever got what he was trying to say. Like, it is a metaphysical position, a textbook metaphysical position.
And what do you think about black people on reparations? I'm listening to this guy, Tariq Nasheed. He's looking for $15 to $20 trillion, and he's looking for acres and acres of land like the Indians have with reservations and casinos.
I think, so Tariq Nasheed, but I am a little bit familiar with his like kind of overarching movement. And yeah, I would agree with reparations, but it has to be practical, right? It has to be pragmatic. It should never be like a maximalist kind of demand. It should always be practical and pragmatic. So what I see is that there needs to be a general land reform, not just for black people, but for people in America in general. I think people in America in general need some kind of land reform. They need land, and they need the basic kind of bare bones tools, technology, and education needed to be able to start their own businesses or invest in like these kinds of things. And I think the black people specifically in America need that and have a historical right to that. I mean, there was the 40 acres and a mule promise, historically. I do think that they have a right to that, but you have to be pragmatic about it. And I think you have to be pragmatic and realistic about it. There's no point in making it
not to be racist, but if we gave like a quarter of the land of this country to, let's say, black people, I don't think it's going to work out for everybody else. I mean, if you look at Africa, it's not like a well-developed continent, Yeah,
here's my reply to that. Well, I'm not really sure like what you're like. Okay. So the reason why Africa isn't a well-developed continent, it's not because the people who live there are black. It's because of the historical development of world history, basically. I mean, modernization happened first in Europe. It happened first in Europe. It's lagging behind in Africa, but I think we're having a modernization and industrialization that's happening in Africa now. I mean, and it's kind of going along with the Belt and Road Initiative and these new infrastructural projects in Africa, which will be the bare bones for an industrialization in Africa. A lot of these countries in Africa are industrializing. They are industrializing. So I'm not sure what you're really getting at there. I don't think that it has anything to do with the fact that they're black. Now, as far as black people having land in America, so it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about land reform in the sense of private citizens having more land, or having land or money or technology, etc., to work with, start their own businesses, or if you're talking about black separatism, right, or the desire for a black nation, I think both of those could be successful. And as far as the existence of a separate black sovereign country in America, I think that would have to depend upon whether or not it's what most black people in America actually want now, and what the popular will of the black people are. I think
we're going to splinter this country to 20 million different tribes to suit everybody.
No. That's the thing. I don't think that black people are just a tribe. I don't agree with the land back stuff. I don't agree with the land back stuff. But there's a big difference between black people in America, who are like maybe 16, 18, 20% of the whole country. And these tiny native tribes. I just don't think it's the equivalent thing at all. And also, I think long term, I don't think the country needs to be split up. I'm just saying that if that is the popular will of the black majority, then fair. I think fair enough. Okay, give it a chance. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case. That probably is not necessarily the case. I think long term, we're building a multinational American civilization, which will be unified and will incorporate the national realities of multiple people.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say one thing.
Go ahead.
When it comes to imperial periphery countries, places like Africa and Asia and everything, it's like they've been de-developed. And, as a South Asian, I can say that, de-development did take place. The British imperialism actually destroyed a lot of our industries. We were like the world leaders in a lot of things, like steel production, shipbuilding, all of those things. And what they took from us is like 45 trillion worth of it. So it's like, if we're gonna, move forward, we're gonna need those 45 trillion back in assets.
What I think about that is, like, historically there has been de-development, not even just with like classical imperialism, but also with American imperialism. Like, if you look at the way the IMF and the World Bank has worked in Africa, it's basically planned a lot of the economies there in a very disastrous way. Michael Hudson talks about, for example, how they often will privilege industrialism over agriculture. But without agriculture, there's no sovereign basis for the industrialism. And so then the country becomes dependent upon American agriculture. That was like a classical kind of feature of the World Bank in the early days of American unipolarity. But I don't necessarily think that the solution to all these things is going to be like in a very literal, discrete way, giving these countries back this money or this wealth, or in a way it's really unquantifiable too, like how much wealth it is. I think it's gonna and also I just don't think it's necessarily pragmatic. I think it's gonna come from the end of imperialism, and basically the end of international interventionism of America and end of Europe. So that's gonna be one premise of this. I think that's going to happen objectively. I think imperialism will objectively fail and will collapse. I think we're already seeing the collapse of American imperialism. And then two, I think it's going to come from forging new win-win trade relations between different countries, which are, one, no longer threaten the political sovereignty of other countries. And two are, based upon the consent of both countries involved to make these trade deals. I think that as far as Asia is concerned, Asia is rising. I mean, China, for example, is the fastest growing economy in the world. I think India eventually will be a very big economy as well. And I also see that in Africa, you are having an industrialization that is starting to occur. And I think long-term, Africa will be very, very powerful. We'll have very, very powerful polarities in the new world that's emerging. I mean, people kind of are sleeping on the significance of Africa. Like, what's going on now, the building up of infrastructure and early industrialization will in a century be the basis for great wealth in the African country.
Well, I don't think American imperialism is going to go away, quietly in the night. With every imperial empire that falls, you get decadence. You get like weird things where you have men getting pregnant. You have teachers promoting, pedophilia in classrooms now. This is like stuff that you saw in the Roman Empire.
It is. It is. It actually is very similar to the kind of decadence of the Roman Empire. I mean, in the Roman Empire, they would have these really like crazy sex cults, and it was really insane. You are seeing something similar to that in America. I think as far as this kind of cultural stuff goes, I take the position of Engels on this, which is that when the Communist Party does come to power, sexuality must become again a purely private matter. So yeah, I don't think it should be taught in schools. I don't really think it should be. I don't really think it should be forced on people as far as like media, movies, and culture is concerned either. And I think that people should just be able to live in their private lives the way they want to. Just a return to just respecting other people's way of life. If someone doesn't believe in this, well, okay, they should be able to have their own beliefs and their own free speech and so on. On the other hand, if someone wants to live a certain way, that should just be their own private business. It should become no longer a political matter, but just a private matter, and should be kept out of public institutions.
Henry, are you a Marxist?
Yeah, I am a Marxist.
I'm not sure. Okay, so what did Marx say anything about this specifically in his writings?
Yeah, Marx did write about like the progression of the family, but Engels did as well. And I was actually referencing Engels. Basically, the position of Engels was that sexuality and the family and so on would become like a purely private matter. If you give me a second, I can actually look through some of the notes I have on Marx and Engels.
I'm trying to learn.
Yeah,
because
just give me a moment.
I barely have time to do anything. I work a lot. I have a lot of bills. I can't read these books. So you sound like you're well read. So I'd appreciate it if you could look it up, because I'm interested in learning what you know.
Yeah, just give me a moment. I'm gonna get the Engels quote first. I think it's in the Principles of Communism. If you just give me 1 second. Okay, so in the Principles of Communism, Engels has a section which is titled "What will be the influence of communist society?" Before I actually read what he says, I'm gonna get into like some of the most common misconception. So the common misconception is that Marxists want to abolish the family in general and get rid of the traditional family, right? But actually, what Engels makes it clear that what will go away with communism is not the family in general, but the so-called bourgeois family. And I would argue that it's the bourgeois family that gives rise to all this decadence, like prostitution and polyamory and all this kind of stuff. And it's communism, which will return family back into being a private matter, and also will have the effect of getting rid of prostitution, and also I think it will result in a more monogamous society. Now, here's what his quote actually says. It will transform the relations between the sexes into a purely private matter, which concerns only the persons involved, and into which society has no occasion to intervene. It can do this since it does away with private property and educates children on a communal basis, and in this way removes the two bases of traditional marriage: dependence rooted in private property of the women on the men and of children on the parents. And here's the answer to the outcry of the highly moral Philistines against the community of women. Community of women is a condition which belongs entirely to bourgeois society, in which when he talks about the community of women, he's talking about stuff like there's like this idea that there'll just be like a communal like marriages between like people, like basically he's kind of talking about polyamory in a way, and also prostitution. The community of women is a condition which belongs entirely to bourgeois society, in which today finds its complete expression in prostitution. But prostitution is based on private property and falls with it. Thus, communist society, instead of introducing community of women, in fact abolishes it. That's what Engels had to say on that. Now, as far as his comments on private property go, I think this has to be interpreted in light of what the Soviet experience and the Chinese experiences of communism has told us about private property. This doesn't mean that property will no longer be operationally used by people. Like in China, people still have property, still use it for business, et cetera, and so on. It's just that the uses of this property is at the end subjugated to the state and the general interest of the people in the final instance. But on the operational level, people will still have property, still use it for business, et cetera, and so on. So I wouldn't really get too caught up about that part. I'm going to see if I can find some of the quotes I remember from Marx about the family and about culture and stuff like that. If you just give me 1 second, I'm going to find that. Here. All right, just give me 1 more second. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, while you're looking for that, I'd like to say, like, these globalists are pushing for the breakup of the family, because when you don't have a strong family unit, it's easier to control people, and power remains at the top.
Yeah, they are trying to destroy the family. I mean, you can see that all of these like non-traditional like ideas about family and stuff like that. I mean, it's being pushed by the globalists. It's being pushed by the deep state. It's being pushed by mainstream media. It is being pushed by all these George Soros-funded activists. It simply is. That's just subjectively true. That is one of their goals, to destroy the family. Let's see. Okay, I think original. I know Marx talked about this as well, but I'm mostly kind of having a harder time finding what I'm looking for on that. But Engels has actually a whole thing on the origin of the family. It's called The Origin of the Family, Private Property in the State. Okay, give me 1 second. I just, just give me 1 second. Give me 1 second.
I mean, it's my understanding that Marxists have the same idea. They want to keep everything communal, and they don't agree there should be a strong family unit. So that, I mean,
yeah. So that's what
Marxists are no better.
Yeah, but see, that's what I was trying to say about the quote from Engels. He actually says it. He says this, and here is the answer to the outcry of highly moral Philistines against the community of women. Community of women is a condition which belongs entirely to bourgeois society, in which today finds its complete expression in prostitution. For prostitution is based on private property and falls with it. Thus, communist society, instead of introducing community of women, in fact, abolishes it. So what Engels actually says is that communism won't introduce the community of women or these like communal relationships. It's going to abolish it. That's word from word what Engels says. This idea that Marxists want to abolish the family in general and want to have like a communal families. That's not really true. That's a misconception. For a communist, the position is this simple: the family becomes a private matter. It becomes a private matter. There is no community of women. That's completely against communism. Communism is completely against prostitution and completely against the community of women. Does that kind of answer your question? So let me tell you. Actually, here's what Marx says about the like communal family. For Marx, right. This is just a form of general prostitution. This is just general prostitution. Like this is for Marx and Engels. They always understood the community of women, or the idea of like communal relationships and so on, as just moving from marriage to general prostitution. That's basically what they saw it as, being just nearly as low as that. That wasn't never the position of Marx and Engels.
And also, like I would also like to add that the subjugation of women, in both the sex trade and also like in the traditional family. It's like two mirror images of each other, and that's sprung from like class society and all those things. And what people the abolish the family is a very I would say stupid slogan. It would be much better to say that. It would be much more accurate to say that abolish gender roles. Both men and women should raise the next generation and take like an equal part in it. That's, I think, more closer to the Marxist position than anything else.
Well, I see what you're saying, but I wouldn't necessarily, I don't know if I would really phrase it as abolish gender roles either. I do see what you're saying in the sense that like both men and women will raise the family, but I think I think for Marx, the details of how the future family will be oriented is mostly like not clearly put forward or clearly known. He more or less talks about what it will not be, right? Like it won't be like the community of women or like, you know, communal relationships. There won't be prostitution. There's even like quotes where he says that the only reason why, where Engels says that he doesn't really know exactly how it all work, but women will only have sex for their own, their own desire. It won't be for money, or coercion, etc., so on, and these kinds of things. One moment, I'm looking through some of Marx's writings right now. So yeah, and another thing is a lot of the critique of Marx of the bourgeois family. It's precisely the critique of the decadence of the bourgeois family. Like he talks, for example, how the family is based on private gain, and compares it to, and also of how the absence of family amongst proletarians who become like public prostitutes, who becomes like public prostitutes, and these kinds of things. He talks about how the uprooting of the proletariat, and how it's reduced to this state that is. So on the one hand, you have the proletariat, and they have the absence of being able to have a stable family because they don't have like land and stable source of livelihood. And on the other hand, you have the bourgeoisie, and they have all this decadence, all this adultery, and all these excesses and stuff. And it's these trends within the family that Marx is attacking when he talks about abolish the family. He doesn't even say abolish. He says Aufhebung of the family, which is the sublation of the family. And the difference between abolish and sublation is kind of subtle. But with abolish, that would mean you just get rid of the family, right? With sublation, it's not that the family goes away, but it takes a new form, or it goes beyond its current limits. And for Marx, these limitations are specifically bourgeois decadence that I mentioned. And so I think in a modern, kind of updating that to our time, we would see this bourgeois decadence has gone full scale. I mean, look at OnlyFans, right? That's literally like a kind of legalization of prostitution. And look at all these like sex cults that the elites are in and stuff like that. So the bourgeoisie, the bourgeoisie are the ones who are liquidating the family, trying to kill the family. For me, a Marxist, the goal of a Marxist is to rescue the family. But the only way in which you can rescue the family is precisely by traversing through this negation and this liquidation and this attack on the family that is being done by modernity and by the bourgeoisie and the sublation of the family. Does that make sense?
Kind of, yes, but also there has something to be said about the reproductive labor of women, like the labor that we do at home, which is very vital to what the maintenance of capitalism, because they're not going to give us, capitalists are not going to make all those arrangements for us. It's a lot of labor that they offload onto us, and we're doing it for free. And it's like, and it's hours and hours of labor. It never ends. When we come back home from work, we also have to do that work. And when we have little children, like newborn babies, we're waking up in the night to do that work as well. So it's a lot of, so this is one of the things that is very apparent in capitalism, that it has not emancipated women from that. And Lenin was talking about getting rid of kitchen slavery. And this is exactly what he was talking about. That a lot of what we call housework is just drudgery. It doesn't produce anything, and it just produces these I wouldn't even call it use values. It's just repetitive, constant work, and it's one of the biggest barriers to women's liberation. And so, of course, the family will have to change. Its form will have to change, of course. To something that gives women more power and more, and has that emancipatory potential. That's what I meant. That it's that direction where it should go.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think that communists do have to address these kinds of issues, and especially because if you don't address them, then you end up ceding these kinds of issues to liberal feminists who have very different designs. When it comes to what you're saying, I completely agree with that. I mean, some of the mothers I know, like at my job and stuff, they work all day basically. Then they go home. The father is absent, and they have to deal with their kids for. They say they have like two jobs basically, right? On the one hand, they're raising their kids. On the other hand, they're doing their actual job. So I completely agree with you. There's a lot of stuff like that needs to be addressed by a communist party. The only reason why I don't speak about that kind of stuff as much is just because I myself am not a woman, so I'm not as privy to the specific needs of women. But I completely agree with you on that. Completely agree with you on that. And there's other stuff too, like abuse and violence against women and that that kind of stuff that has to be addressed by a communist party.
Yeah, no, the abuse as well also has a function. The function is to enforce that sort of, social reproduction goal. Because, if let's say, this is usually done by the husband or the boyfriend or whatever he is, but without knowing it, he is participating in that, in that power structure. And there's a lot of ideological justification as well that this is just a labor of love, or this is what women are for, blah blah blah, all these things, but it forms part of the superstructure, and of course we know what the base is.
Yeah, also I think there's another problem that we're facing in our society now, kind of related to that, which is that kind of I think the whole like reproduction of like social reproduction you're speaking about, it's kind of fallen apart now, because in a lot of developed countries, like people don't really want to have kids anymore, both for like cultural reasons and for economic reasons and spiritual reasons. So on the one hand, I think there needs to be a reinvigoration of the human spirit. And I think, for example, they're struggling with this in China, and I think they're trying to do this in China as well. On the other hand, I think probably in the modern world, it can't just be women shouldering the whole weight of raising children and housework and all that stuff. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, it's if we watch.
I didn't want to, but New Amontua is in the VC. Just want to let you know, Henry.
Good baby. But we only got like another 40 minutes or so, because Haas is going to be.
Who's in the VC?
Haas is going to be streaming
New Amontua.
And also, I just want to add one more thing, because I have to be somewhere. What I totally agree with you on that, and also because I see things as potential versus kinetic energy. If we have proletarian women, and it's like a huge group, like half the population. If we're not going to be utilizing their talents in order to make a strong socialist society and everything, then I don't think it's a good idea. So we have to have everybody, all hands on deck.
Yeah.
And remaking society and all of those things. And I think that women's liberation is one of the key projects if we're gonna to achieve such a society.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, in the USSR, you kind of had a very similar thing where women were gaining more education than ever before. They were working more than ever before. They were even in the military. They were scientists and engineers and that kind of thing. So yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And I do think that is one of the goals of communists. I do think it has to be one of the goals of communists. And I think historically it has been. So yeah, I completely agree with you on that. You said Nua Mata is in the VC. Where is he at? What do you mean?
I just invite him to speak. He's here.
Okay, yeah, he can talk if you want, but we only have like another 40 minutes because Haas is gonna stream soon. I don't want to overlap with that, but we can talk for maybe 30-40 minutes.
Did he just leave?
No, he's still here. It says
You are a coward. Get into VC.
I think he left.
It says on my screen he's still here.
But also for the piece from, I can't really fully read his name, but the guy whose username starts with peace. One of the things I wanted to emphasize is that communists do not believe in like communal families or stuff like that, or like that's one of the things that Marx and Engels talk about a lot, is that they reject the community of women, and they saw it as like a general prostitution. So they were completely against that.
Some communists, for example, Kollontai believes in that, but people spoke up against.
What you said?
Real quick. Kollontai believes in like a communal family shit.
Really? That's interesting. I haven't really read a lot of Kollontai. I've read a little bit of Kollontai.
She was big into free love as well.
Really? Are you sure? That seems really surprising to me. That sounds really, really surprising.
Yeah.
Because do you have like a reference?
My memory of reading this.
Yeah, but do you remember which book or whatever?
Fuck, I don't remember. I'll link it to you. But I know that Trotsky spoke up against her on these topics as well. They were like arguing bad against her and talking shit about her.
I don't know. I'm just honestly not familiar enough with her to really like say for sure. I really just don't know. I've read a little bit of her and a little bit about her. I know she was against a lot of the feminists of her time. She also really stressed, I think, and I think she also really addressed the issue we were talking about, like social reproduction and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't really read enough for her to really know if that's the case or not. But yeah, you can just send me the.
I'll send you some stuff. I'll send you some stuff later. No worries. But yeah, New Amata, if you do not get on, you are a coward.
Oh, I think he's on right now. Did you want to speak, New Amata? Right. Or something like a position you had or anything?
Speak.
I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, not much. I think. I mean, of course, I'm gonna say I won on my side. But I could always explain why I think I won on my side.
Wait a second. Wait, are you just trying to like continue your debate with Haas and like?
No. I mean,
it's kind of old news now. It's kind of old news.
No, I thought you wanted to talk with me about that. If you want to talk with me about other stuff, that's fine.
Well, I don't know. I thought you. I mean, if we can talk about that, we can talk about. I mean, we can talk about it if you want to. I mean, it's up to you. We can debate anything, really.
No, I
only have like another 30 or 40 minutes, but we can debate anything in that time.
No, I wasn't here to debate. I just wanted to listen in on the whole conversation, just to like see what y'all were talking about. I mean, I just saw it pop up in my down my feed. So,
well, let me ask you a question. What is your goal as a political actor? What is your goal?
I want to elevate the discussion of what like land back or indigenous activism is. Anyways, I think the topic of like land back, like.
So let me ask you a question about indigenous activism.
Huh?
Like example. So yeah, on the question of indigenous activism, when you were debating with Haas, why is it that of the examples you gave of land back, other than the Indian Collective, which was something you reject, obviously, why was it like mostly like majority white organizations like the PSL and stuff like that?
To show that there were Marxist organizations that were open to how land back functions.
Yeah, but there are organizations that are like, one, very minor and irrelevant, and two, they're not really examples of indigenous activism, you know?
That is true. I mean, you also do have like the Lakota Law Collective. You have the Indigenous Environmental Coalition. You have a lot of like large organizations run by indigenous peoples as well as like each tribal government participating through their like tribal funding or through indigenous educated lawyers. So
but do they all like support like your vision of land back, where all the historical treaties will be honored and will return all that land to the specific native tribes that they belong to? Because it seems like I feel like a lot of Native American tribes have much more modest ambitions and demands.
It's modest. There are modest demands because of how like extensive this goal is. Like this is the end goal. Like respecting all of the treaties and having to renegotiate how sovereignty within the United States works.
Yeah, that's your I get that that's your end goal. But I mean, like, is that the end goal of like the majority of Native American tribes? Because I don't know. Like, if you can provide like I don't know if I'm really sold on that. I would have to be provided more evidence of that.
That's fair. No, that's fair. I mean, like, what was it? I wasn't expecting to convince every like proletarian patriot with that debate. What I wanted to do was state the case of like there are real world examples in which like a model of autonomy within like a larger country functions even within the case of a minority. And when Todd was talking about like indigeneity, I wanted to show like
So let me address some of the examples you gave in the debate. You gave examples in the USSR, and in most of those examples, the group that was given sovereignty, they were in a lot of cases, in some cases they were majorities, in other cases they were not like extremely small minorities. They were relatively large groups, and this did not really deny Russian sovereignty either. It's just that the limits of Russian sovereignty were changed. In the case of indigenous movements in South America, I think it's also a lot different because in South America, in some South American countries, indigenous populations are again much bigger. And then also there's also the fact that the indigenous people are much more mixed and interwoven with Yeah, they're much more mixed. So I think all of these, most of these examples you gave were very, very unique from the American context and from the American situation. And what happened was a lot more pragmatic and much more to the needs of the people of the time and of the era. But I don't think that in America it really addresses the needs of the American people in general. That tens and tens of millions of non-Native Americans would be under tribal authority. I also don't think you ever really gave a strong rebuttal to the idea that this is kind of like a neo-feudalism, because basically you're saying that these people will rule the land based upon their lineage, and that will be what determines their sovereignty over these vast stretches of land that encompass millions and millions of people who won't have that same level of sovereignty because they don't come from the same lineage.
Yeah, so let me address the second part first. I think in terms of neo-feudalism, I also don't know when it started. I'll just leave that for now. I don't in terms of neo-feudalism, I don't know when it started. Second, it wouldn't be neo-feudalism because there would be ability to renegotiate how representation would function, let's say in the Congress or in terms of voting for the presidency.
There was local democracies and stuff in feudalist societies as well. So I don't think it really addresses the main point.
No, these would be national elections. All of the non-native population, how would they be able to participate in those elections under indigenous sovereignty? I think these can be negotiated, and I don't think it's set in stone.
Let me ask you a question then. If people in general can participate in the elections of these new tribal sovereign lands, what's stopping the leadership of these lands from being just mostly white and maybe some black people, and what's stopping it from just becoming the same as it is now? Because won't the majority probably?
Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Did you hear me?
Yeah, you cut off when you said what's stopping the majority.
Yeah, so I'll just say it again pretty concisely. So basically what I'm saying is that let's say you have a sovereign a territory that's under tribal rulership, but let's say they're able to have votes on this land, and people in general are able to be elected and vote. It is kind of a democracy, right? Wouldn't it be the case that just the white majority would probably win most of the spots in the Congress or gain most of the political power just because they're the majority and it's a democracy?
I don't doubt that.
So then so is it really that different then? Yeah. Then what? I mean, how? In what way would it be native land then? If the political sovereignty is back in the hands of mostly non-native people?
I think during the point of transition in which the native land is indigenous, you would have maybe a 5-year period in which indigenous peoples, leadership is indigenous, and then you would have a quota system in which indigenous peoples can fill in certain spots and have a representation with the other national people, either white Americans, black Americans, Americans, etc. So, and I think that way, and then following a lot of the indigenous structures and systems that exist either now or that were traditional, and kind of trying to negotiate between how U.S. Americans want it and how indigenous people want it, while under indigenous sovereignty and while being governed under treaty laws. Because the treaties have specific provisions, where some are really simple, these lands are hunting, these lands are for fishing, these lands are for grazing, and then others are what are the mineral resources that are controlled by indigenous people, or what is the extent by which the U.S. can intercede on indigenous lands, and what protocols do they have to follow when talking with indigenous?
Yeah, so I think I pretty much get what you're saying. So if it's all right, I'm gonna give a reply. All right. So I think then I was right to say that this would be kind of a new feudalism then, because it's still the case that it seems like indigenous people will be politically privileged over the vast majority of people. And you will have a case where a majority of people are under the rulership of a very small minority of people based purely upon lineage, and their ability to use the land and how they can use the land and so on. It seems that it's going to be primarily decided by these tribal authorities. That doesn't sound very democratic to me. It doesn't sound very socialistic to me. It doesn't sound really socialistic or democratic in either a socialist or a liberal sense to me.
I disagree. if we look at like Bolivia and Venezuela, they have like specific seats within their parliament or within like their national congresses on where like how many indigenous people like will be selected as indigenous like representatives.
Yeah, that's much more. Like, that's much more moderate than what you're proposing, because we're talking because one, the indigenous people are much more representative of Bolivian society, and two, this is just having quotas is much more limited than having quotas, having tribal sovereignty, and having the tribe be able to decide how the different sections of the land are able to use. In Bolivia, we're talking about something that's much more moderate in the context of Bolivian society than it would be in the context of America, where there's such a disparaging and huge gap between the non-indigenous community and the indigenous community. Also, another thing I wanted to point out, this is kind of a new point. I think this wouldn't really be a fair deal for the Black Americans that live in America. Why is it that? Why is it, for example, that we despite living here for hundreds of years, playing a really fundamental role in the creation of modern America and so on, that our political sovereignty is pretty much completely taken away by these indigenous tribes? And then also another question is, what about Hispanic people who are maybe partially indigenous to the more southwestern, southern, and Texas and places like this? I mean, they may be partially indigenous, they may have some indigenous blood, but they're not really part of they're not part of any tribal authority. It seems like this would be a lose for Black Americans, for white Americans, and probably for Hispanic Americans as well. It seems like we would be losing our political sovereignty to a very small minority of people. And like I said, you can give examples of other countries, but there's really no country I can think of where a very small indigenous minority in the form of a tribe rules over a worked out successfully, or the people there don't feel like there's any loss of political dignity or political rights and so on. Oh yeah, and I'll let you address that first, but I have more arguments too, but I'll let you address that first.
Yeah, so like with that actually connects with like the plurinationality part of it. With Venezuela, you have a population that's actually lesser in percentage than Native Americans are to the like the rest of the American population. We're like 2.9% in the United States, and in Venezuela, I think it's like 2.5% of the population is indigenous. And yet there are more provisions for Native autonomy as well as Native spaces within the Congress, which I think is. Which I think they're overrepresented based on the quota system in their national Congress. Like they're not 2.5%. I think they're more. Yeah. But beyond. Okay. And we just have indigenous people vote. Like that's one. Two. You can have autonomy within those tribal governments as well. It's not the treaties that have been written in 1871 are like the only law. Like if you look at the 20-point position paper, I recommend everyone look that up. It's a very pragmatic and very point-by-point answer on how native sovereignty would be negotiated. They don't say, yeah, once the 1877 treaties are upheld, or like ones before 1871, that's it. No native laws can change. No, they argue there could be new native treaties written. There just needs to be a new process by which the native governments interact with the federal government and with the presidency and the Congress. Yes. And how this. Okay. That. Yeah. And I think. Well, let me answer real quick. Then you can have like also how do we negotiate like Black and Latino and like Asian and like types of autonomy under like indigenous sovereignty. History didn't stop in 1871 when like the treaty system stopped being made. I think you can argue for native autonomy within those native or non-native autonomy within those native structures. Like it happened in the Soviet Union, like under the Russian Soviet Federal Socialist Republic, you had like the Bashkirs being autonomous within the Russian system. You had but isn't that the exact opposite? It's the autonomy of regional nationalities that still exist under the majority nationality in that case, because Russia was the majority. But they were. So it's kind of the exact opposite of what you're saying. It's like literally the exact opposite. But indigenous people are still underneath the United States. They don't leave the system. They have a specific legal position that is autonomous on a federal level, and then you have the more But here's the thing. Here's the problem with what you're saying. So first, I'm going to start with Venezuela. That is a country that has a smaller percentage of indigenous people.
And yeah, they do reserve. I think they reserve maybe three. They reserve like 3 seats in the National Assembly or something along those lines. I still think that's far more modest and probably far more representative of their actual like significance in Venezuelan society, as opposed to like your idea, like that map you showed. I mean, like I don't see how in any way like reserving like a few seats for indigenous delegates is comparable to splitting up America among different tribes and the tribal authority of these tribes. I think a very large percentage of the land and of the population that people live on would be under these tribal authorities. That's not really what's happening in Venezuela. They just promised a few seats in the National Assembly and in the parliament. That's just in state assemblies and so on. But that's just not really at all comparable in scale or in magnitude. As far as the Soviet Union goes, I want to point out 2 things. One, the Soviet Union did, after all, fail, and one of the problems that came about when it collapsed was that you have it basically disunified, and now you have today, for example, one of those countries, one of those republics. It used to be a republic in the Soviet in the USSR. Is now the hotbed of neo-Nazi aggression against Russia. So one, I don't even think they're necessarily the best example for the national question. I think the way in which Lenin resolved the national question still had too many biases from the European social democratic movement. Secondly, so I think that Venezuelan example, I think I addressed that fairly well. And also with the Soviet Union, I just don't think that's a great example. But actually, even if we are going to use the Soviet Union as a model for the national question, again, you have this problem where in these Soviet republics, usually it would be a very large percentage of the society that was the so-called native population, right? You'd have a very large, like in Chechnya, in Georgia, you have a lot of Georgians, and you see what I'm saying? It's not like a case where like you have 3% of Chechens in Chechnya ruling over like 97% of like Russians and like non-Chechens. It's really not comparable at all. So I think we're not really making progress here because you're still using these examples which are really not comparable to America. Maybe you could use China as a better example, but even then that would not be the same as land back because, well, like in China, you have these areas where some groups have a degree of political autonomy and so on. And but even then, it's like it's not really comparable to what you're talking about as far as land back goes. But I think something like that might be reasonable. Like in America, maybe these native groups, they would have more land than they have now. They would have some degree of political autonomy, kind of similar to how different groups and different nations in China have some degree of political autonomy in some cases. Maybe special administrative zones, stuff like that. Yeah, I can see that, but I think that's very different than saying that you have to give back these giant swaths of land. Now, you didn't mention something. You basically said that we don't have to completely obey, I think, the 1870 treaties and completely obey these dead treaties. We can make new treaties. But that seems to be a bit different than the position that you and Haas were debating about, because it seems like the contention between you and Haas was the fact that some of these treaties just would not really be pragmatic or reflective of currently existing American realities. Not only because they're outdated, but because the population has changed a whole lot and just a whole lot of things. But you seem to argue for, preserving the sanctity of the letter of these treaties. Now you're saying that new treaties can be negotiated. I agree. We should negotiate new treaties. I just think that those treaties should be reasonable to both sides. As Haas said, they should reflect the cultural, spiritual, and economic and political needs of the Native American people and developmental needs of the Native American tribes. And also, I think the same applies to other national groups in America. It should be based upon the living needs of the people, and I think that's a lot different than what you're arguing originally.
Well, I think ultimately, the examples are like pretty different. But when Haas was specifically saying, what Haas specifically said was, no majority would ever accept a minority ruling over them. He didn't make specifics about a percentage of minorities, a certain type of minority could never rule. He said no majority would ever accept a minority ruling. And that's what happened in the Kazakh SSR. This is which is why I bring it up. And this is why I don't bring up the Ukraine, because the Ukraine situation is much different than Kazakhstan now. Kazakhstan actually does have a lot more connection with Putin now. Like especially after last year, when Putin came in to crush the coup that was against the current president there. That's why I make that example, and also I feel it is possible to have a minority, like quote, ruling over a majority. You had like over 50% Russians and Ukrainians together. They could have been like, we're an Orthodox people. We won't accept Kazakh people ruling over, but they did, because I think the national question was very much at hand, where we have class solidarity with these folks and understand their specific conditions of nationality are necessary to create a harmonious Soviet.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. At what point in the history of Kazakhstan did it have a Russian majority?
Yeah, let me look at the where was it? The census records, Kazakhstan demographics, because I think it's in 1959. So this would be, I think, under Khrushchev.
Yeah, well, the reason why I bring it up is because I don't think it couldn't have been a very like big majority that the Russian population had, because now the Kazakhstan population is the majority, so it had to be pretty close overall, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was like 51%.
So I think that's more so in like, I feel like that doesn't mean the rule is untrue. That's just an exception to the rule, because we're talking about 49%, right? What Haas is saying, if you take that in context, he's obviously making a point that just like it's not going to be like there's not going to be an extreme minority that's ruling over a vast majority. Now, if it's like so close to where it's like 50%, 49%, it's like, yeah, that's different. That's just very different. And also, let me get you on the record. Wait a second. Let me get you on the record. Let me get you on the record. Saying something. You did admit that these examples were not the same as America, and I mean, by consequence of that, would you agree that they don't really apply to the American context, because we're talking instead of like a 50 difference, we're talking about like a 97. Like 2.5% difference. So you see what I'm saying? Like that.
No, it wasn't 2.5%. It was there were Kazakh minority was like 10, 15, 20% lower than the quote Orthodox like Ukrainian Russian population. Like in 1959, you had a 30%.
Yeah, I think you misheard what I said. I'm saying like in America, maybe like 2.5 or 3% of people are Native American, and then like over 90% are not. In Kazakhstan, we're talking about 40 versus 50%, or 40 versus 60%, or something like that. It's like, this is just completely not comparable. Like, would you at least agree with that? Would you at least agree that these examples are just completely not comparable? And we're talking about two different things here.
I think when Haas was talking about like majorities, he was talking outright.
I think if you actually use if you use common sense and you take what he's saying in context, he's not saying that there's no example in the history of mankind where 51% of people were ruled over by 49% of people. That's actually not. I mean, that's just like a very bad faith interpretation of what he's saying, especially when he's talking about Native Americans in America. He's obviously talking about like a very big difference. And even then, the reason why this was possible was because you still had the gigantic country Russia, which was at the center of the Soviet Union. It seems like with your land back proposal, yeah, you're still saying that America, the USA, will still exist and have some kind of sovereignty, but it seems like there would be very little like land comparative to now for the American people, as opposed to the amount of land the Russian people had. Like, it just seems like the example is just so different. And I think that was Haas's main point, is that these examples are just not the same. Will you admit that these examples, that you can't, like, this example doesn't really work as an argument for America because they're so different? Will you admit that? Can you hear me okay? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I think you beat him.
I can hear you.
What's going on?
It says he's connecting, so that might mean he left.
Let's give it a little time. Let's give it a little time. But yeah, I mean, I think my point is pretty simple. I think my point is pretty simple, though. Like, one second. I think my point is pretty simple. So with the Kazakhstan argument, we're talking about maybe 60% Russian, 40% Kazakhstan, and there's still like the USSR. There's still the Russian center. And with America, I mean, we're talking about like 2.5% native population. That's not like that example does not work as an argument. Any rational person can understand that. Now, who was speaking a second ago?
That was me. I had a question about like the Kazakh SSRs and the other various like non-Russian SSRs in the Soviet Union. Because I spent like an hour trying to look into the ethnic policy of these SSRs in relation to the the non quote unquote native population. So what sort of political? I was trying to find out like what sort of political power the Russians in the Kazakh SSR had. Like, were they allowed to be part of the Kazakh government or the Kazakh Communist Party? Because I did see, I did find something about like how the central government, the central committee was trying to like encourage more participation by like the native people in their own parties, which seems to suggest to me that the parties were not just simply like barred entry for anybody who wasn't like, it wasn't as if like the Communist Party only allowed Kazakhs into it.
But I've never really made the argument that like Russians had like full political representation in Kazakh. I mean, the whole point of making a Kazakh republic, right, is that it's supposed to represent the interests of the Kazakh people, and it's supposed to limit the boundaries of Russia, basically. As far as the Kazakh Communist Party goes, that's a little bit different than the republic, because the Communist Party is not meant to be like democratic in the same way to begin with. There's always been strict requirements on who can join the Communist Party. So it would make sense for a Kazakhstan Communist Party to have preference for people from people for Kazakhs, right? That would make a lot of sense. I just don't think that's the same as like a situation where you have like maybe like 2% of a country or a state ruling over like 98%. And barring them from having political representation. I just don't think that's like the same kind of situation, because we're talking more like 40-60%, right? And today, I mean, who's the majority of people in Kazakhstan today is Kazakhs. So I mean, like that's so like the difference could not have been that great if the majority of people today are now Kazakhs. I just don't think the example is at all applicable. I really just think it's not at all applicable. He was really, I think that's really a reach. Oh yeah, he's back. Okay. What was the last thing you heard before you left?
I don't remember actually. I think it was I think you were just talking about the Kazakh minority. And sorry for like my bad Wi-Fi. I don't run away from like a debate like this. It's usually when my Wi-Fi that cuts up, and I have to like restart my phone. So sorry for everyone who thought I was like pulling a fast one.
Yeah, gotcha. So all I want to say is this: it seems like the examples you gave in the USSR, specifically the one in Kazakhstan, does not apply to America, because in America we're talking about like a 97%, 2.5% difference, and in Kazakhstan we're talking more like a 60-40% difference. So it seems like these two examples are just completely uncomparable, and you can't use that as an argument for land back in America. Would you agree with that assessment?
I'd say that opens up the need for like special like administration zones. Actually, like when I say we should apply the laws of the treaties, all the ones that were written before 1871, I think that needs to be the first start. I think that's
you kind of dodged the question. I didn't ask about special administration zones, which are different. I asked if the example of Kazakh applied to America.
Oh, I think it shows that like there is a possibility of like a majority accepting a minority rule.
But how much of a minority? That's the thing. We're talking about a 40% minority versus a 2% minority. Do you not see how these are two completely different minorities, and how this completely changes whether or not it's an applicable piece of evidence? Will you at least admit that this evidence does not apply to the American context specifically, because the minorities are drastically different?
If you look at like a lot of the zones that are like within treaty right, they're very rural. They're very empty. Like if you look at the same map that you were that Haas put up, the one about the 1871 lands, Indian lands. The one like look at the Cree. What was it like? The Crow, the Black, and it was a section on the upper left side of Texas. It's some of the most underpopulated sections of Texas. And it does include some cities, and I think those could be, but that I think around like 10,000, maybe 20,000 people. I'm not sure about the population, but the vast majority of it is like severely underpopulated compared to Austin, Dallas on the eastern part of Texas. So I think in those cases, it's much easier to make those to make claims to sovereignty because it's a lot more proportional.
It's really not. It's still not that proportional though. It's still not comparable at all to Kazakhstan. It's still not.
But on that other point, I still think there's a possibility of like where there are larger populations, like like major like metropolitan cities, there can be special like administration zones, so that those people have more sovereignty and more negotiation power with indigenous people.
Okay, so what you're doing is you're offering an addition or to this land back plan you have, but you're still running away from the question that I asked, which is whether or not the evidence you've been giving with the USSR is actually applicable to America. Yes or no?
I think it is. I think it is.
Wait a second. Are you actually being intellectually honest when you say that a situation in which maybe 40% of people had sovereignty over the 60% majority is comparable to maybe in these special areas, right? Maybe it's like 10% of Native Americans or 5% of Native Americans have sovereignty over like 90% of non-natives or 95% of non-natives. You actually think honestly that's comparable? That is the same thing?
They're not the same.
So how can you use this? In what way can you use this as an evidence for land back in America when the situation is just so radically different? The population is just so radically different.
Well, Haas was very clear when he said, like, no.
You're debating with me right now. You're debating with me right now, and I'm going to press you on that. You're debating with me right now, and I'm going to press you on the examples you're giving. These examples are not applicable to America. That's a red line I have, and you have not in any way demonstrated that these examples that you gave against Haas and against me were actually applicable to America because they're actually radically different, as you yourself would admit.
I wouldn't say they're radically
40% is radically different than 5%. It just really is. I don't know what to tell you. It just really, really is.
Which is why I make the claim that there needs to be a special administration in those areas that are heavily populated.
Yeah. But even if you make that claim, are you at least going to admit that this means that the evidence you gave was not applicable to the situation? We can discuss that claim separately, but will you at least admit that evidence was not applicable to the situation?
I think it's applicable, but I think we have to put it into context of how
it's not applicable. It's not. Can you just be honest? It's not applicable.
It's applicable in showing that a minority can be ruled by.
Yeah, but the minorities are okay. Are you like? So okay, wait a second. We're looping. This is a loop. This is a loop.
He's broken.
This is a loop. I already replied to this point. And you have not given.
No, I'm trying.
Yeah, I already replied to this point, and I'm telling you that they're different minorities. Okay, are you gonna? Okay, let's be scientific here. Okay, 40% is a 40% minority the same thing as a 10% minority? Yes or no?
A 39% minority isn't the same as a 40% minority. No, it's not mathematical.
Okay, but there's a bigger difference, right? We're talking about a big difference. We're not talking about 1% difference. We're talking about a big difference.
Yes, there's a
big difference. So if there's a big difference between the example you gave and American land back, maybe that example you gave is not actual evidence for America because, as I said, like 10 minutes ago, there's a radical difference. There's a big difference between the two examples.
I wouldn't say it's a radical difference.
So it's a big. Okay, wait. What's your? So the hill you're going to die on is that it's a big difference, but not a radical difference. Is that the hill you're going to die on?
No, I'm saying the difference doesn't preclude the possibility of land back being successful.
I'm saying that it's not evidence. I'm saying that it's just not evidence for this argument that you're making. You can continue to make the argument, but that evidence you gave is not applicable. That's what I'm saying.
I think it is applicable. I think especially in the large area that like the Kazakhs own, like they own 673 million acres. That's like 2 million kilometers of land. And there was still that sparse population. Why? I mean, they didn't have
so
to
I'm gonna just do the best faith I can give to you. Okay, the best faith that I can possibly give to you. So in Oklahoma, there's about 8%. There's like an 8%. Let's see. There's like an 8% native population. So maybe in some areas you might have maybe a 5%, a 7%, an 8%. Native population in some areas, okay? So maybe in these specific areas, it's not just 2%, right? So I'll give you that good faith. Now, what I want you to also admit is that this is still radically, or maybe you don't like radically, it's still very, very different than the example you gave with the USSR. It's still very, very different than that, and I don't think that the example you gave of the USSR is really applicable evidence for the argument that you're trying to make.
Which is why I always add in like concept like or examples like in Venezuela.
But the Venezuelan example is also not applicable because we're just talking about 3 parliamentary seats. That's not at all as significant as the kind of preference.
They also have autonomy. They also have autonomy over.
But they also have local quotas. But what I'm saying is it's not at all comparable to what you're talking about in America in magnitude as well. I think the gap that we're having is that the examples you give are very different in magnitude. So in the case of Venezuela, maybe the percentage is more similar of the people, but the amount of political power they have is not equivalent to the amount of political power that you want Native Americans to have in America, as far as tribal authorities ruling over these vast stretches of land and having all these different sovereign tribes that rule over these large stretches of land. It's just not. These things are not equivalent. Let me ask you a question. Why are you so against the idea of Native Americans having more land, but that land being adequate towards their living needs and not reflecting these old treaties in a one-to-one way? Why are you so against that? I still can see there being Native American sovereignty. We're not against that. We've never been against that. But it's just the magnitude of the demand you're making is where it becomes problematic. What is wrong with just giving them enough land to meet their economic, cultural, and developmental and political needs, which was exactly what Haas suggested? What is wrong with that? Is it just the law? Is it just these old treaties? Is it just the dead letter of the law? Is that the only, what is wrong with that?
I think if you look at the way reservations were created, they were not lands to be very economically sufficient for indigenous life. In terms of agriculture, they were.
So yeah, but that's not relevant to what I said. I'm saying.
What I'm saying, okay,
give them different land that is more suitable to their needs, and maybe even more land that's more suitable to their needs. I'm just saying it doesn't have to reflect the old treaties in a one-to-one literal way.
Well, in terms of the Constitution, they are like a one-to-one relationship.
We're still talking about law here. I'm saying why? So your argument is purely legal then, right? It's not actually based.
No. One is there's a legal side, which I'm trying to show. There's a legal precedent. That's why I also made the ontological precedent with Heidegger.
There's no ontological precedent for this. Not only with Heidegger, but not in history. There's no ontological precedent for this at all.
Heidegger. No. Well, Haas wasn't able to answer the Heidegger.
He completely destroyed you in respect to Heidegger. You're just not responding to him. Also, I want to make a point that you also never really properly responded to. Don't you see that your view of legality is based upon metaphysics?
What do you mean?
I'll explain to you why it's based upon metaphysics. It's based upon a dead essence. It's based upon publishing a dead essence.
Yeah, but I don't think it's based on metaphysics. You have treaties made between Russia and the Soviet Union. No, China and the Soviet Union. The Good Friendship Agreement of 1991 that negotiated how the borders between China and Russia would be made. That's not metaphysics.
Yeah, but that was made in 1991. That was made in 1991. And also, guess what? The way in which these treaties will be applied in real geopolitical terms is going to be based upon geopolitical realities. So what are you talking about? This is not the examples you give are always just completely radically unrelated to what we're talking about. That treaty. I'm not saying that treaties have no value at all. I'm saying that the concrete material reality existing today has primacy over the letter of the law. To premise the letter of the law is classic textbook metaphysics, because you're prescribing to it some kind of fundamentality or essentiality that goes beyond the material conditions that exist in the present and in the future, and as they dialectically develop.
That's what Haas was saying in terms of indigenous people. We have the mythos,
That's a different point. That's a different point. That's actually a different point. That's a different point.
That's an ontological question. That's a metaphysical question in relation to the land.
No, that's not. You're making a point about you're talking about their connections to land now, not the law. That's a different point. So you're jumping points.
But no, that's one. That's point one.
Yeah, but you just pivoted. You just pivoted from the question of the law.
No, that's point one. The second.
No, wait a second. That was the point we were discussing. We're not talking about metaphysics. Was the law?
No, that's okay. You're cutting me off when I'm trying to make specific points.
Because you're making points that don't address what I say.
Okay.
So address what I said about the law now.
The second point. Okay, the second point, and this is the one that I go directly to you. when it comes to legality, that form of geopolitics must be negotiated through through treaties, and 1991 treaty was renegotiated back in 2004 as well, reflecting how geopolitics is done there. It's not a set motion that once the treaty's there, they have to now it's just there forever. How those the specific land claims and the specific defense claims that are made there get renegotiated based on who's present and also based on the needs of the time.
That's based on that's actually an argument for my side then. That's an argument for my side.
Which is why I'm open to once the treaties are fulfilled, once up to 1871, there should be new treaties that renegotiate how governance is made between indigenous peoples and larger the larger populations.
Okay. Let me reply to that. So
special economic or administration.
Yeah. Let me reply to that. So you just did something sneaky. You say that these treaties can be renegotiated, but that's with the premise that they are honored up till 1870. All the treaties up till 1870 are honored. But what I'm saying is that that itself is based upon a primacy for the law over the existing material conditions, and that itself should not even be a premise of the argument. That these treaties, maybe in some spiritual sense, they should be respected, but the actual letter of the law, no, that does not have primacy over people's existing material conditions. That will come first before any law. In the example you gave of a treaty being renegotiated, it was just that the treaty was renegotiated. That actually argues for my point, which is that treaties do change, and sometimes they become null. Sometimes new treaties are made, et cetera, and so on. So maybe we should have a new treaty with these Native American tribes, or maybe we should renegotiate the old treaties. But the idea that these treaties should be upheld to the letter of the law hundreds of years ago is just completely insane. It does not reflect currently existing material realities. This is from a materialist standpoint, not a metaphysical standpoint, the metaphysical standpoint that you're coming from.
You know why indigenous people use those treaties? Because there is no other way to negotiate treaties. Unless you open up that institution, there is no other way for indigenous peoples to make claims over that land. It's the main tactic.
Yeah. But using a treaty to negotiate the conditions of the treaty and how it will be applied and so on is different than the claim that we must want to obey the letter of the law of these treaties and give them this exact amount of land for these exact tribes. Those are two completely different things. I'm saying, as a political tactic, use these treaties to negotiate getting more land. But the idea that the land that these Native American tribes get must be identical to the original terms of the treaty, that's just not realistic. One, is not realistic. It's not pragmatic. And secondly, it just does not reflect the living needs of the people in America. It does not reflect the American people and what they need. What I'm saying is give Native Americans land based upon what their actual material needs are today, which is different than what their material conditions and needs were in the past when those treaties were actually made. Do you see the sense there?
Well, that's why I think those. I think in terms of the treaties, those are the most well set boundaries that can be made, and from there we can work on what type of situation can be, which type of situation can be carved out. But I think in terms of how indigenous people the treaties themselves already concessions to the U.S. government. The idea that indigenous people have to make more concessions, thus reducing their economic power, especially when they're 80% unemployment on reservations.
Wait a second, they're not making concessions right now. Maybe when those treaties were signed, they were concessions. But right now, we're drawing from those treaties are not concessions because they don't currently own. If that was a concession, you wouldn't even need land back because they would already have the land. They don't have the land right now.
Those were the concessions back then, and even then, the land,
then, but not now.
That's in 1887. You had those. Native Americans owned 138 million acres. 77 of those.
None of this addresses the point I made. You never addressed the point I'm making. None of that addresses the point I made at all. It does not at all address the point I made. That does not at all address the point I made.
Say the point again.
The point is this: Native Americans should be given more land based upon their presently existing material conditions and their economic, spiritual, developmental, and even political needs. They should, on the other hand, not be given land based upon the letter of the law from treaties that were signed hundreds of years ago and reflect realities that existed hundreds of years ago. We should actually maybe make new treaties or renegotiate these treaties based upon existing realities.
Well, you have to. Well, first you have to actually have the treaty implemented.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't have to have the treaty implemented. You don't have to give the Native Americans back all the land that was promised in the treaty in order to have a new treaty or give them some land. You don't have to have this maximalist demand.
There is no institution. There is no institution prior to this for that to happen. There's no institution that.
There doesn't have to be. There doesn't have to. Wait a second. There doesn't have to.
You understand? You keep cutting me off.
You never really reply to my points. But continue. Just go ahead. Go ahead.
When William Z. Foster said, yes, indigenous, like the land question is the most essential question. It's not about administration and it's not about population. He's making a very real statement that indigenous people's claim to the land is itself the motor of economic development for indigenous people. And now also in terms of how indigenous people negotiate taxation, redistribution of policies, mineral rights, those are extremely important to be able to jumpstart indigenous people out of poverty. In many ways, the reason why it's so important for indigenous people to have the claims to a lot of those lands is because those are very mineral-rich lands, and they're much more adept at distribution.
Okay. So we have this problem. Where you say things in a circular way without actually addressing my points. Just stop talking for a moment, because this is so. I literally said they should have the money and the land that they need to suit the needs of their economic development. So what you're saying is entirely consistent with what I said, and by that premise, it does not actually rebuttal or contest anything I said, because what you're saying is completely consistent with what I said as far as giving them lands that are economically of value and will suit their economic needs. I said they should have land that will suit their economic needs. The distinction is whether or not it should be the land that was promised by the treaties hundreds of years ago, or whether or not it should meet their present needs. You're not actually addressing the fundamental argument here. You're just not. When you speak of their economic needs, you're not economic needs. You're not addressing it whatsoever.
So what would be the app number for indigenous peoples to own, like in terms of like territory, land?
That would have to be decided on a tribe-by-tribe basis, and obviously I don't have a specific number for each of them. Maybe no, that's not an argument, though. That's not an argument. That's not an argument. Just like no, but I'm not. That's not an argument. That is not an argument.
In terms, you're unable to provide a counter number to what.
I don't need to provide a specific number because I'm not president of the world right now. An institution that exists to do this would have to provide specific numbers, but I don't have to provide specific numbers because that's stuff that has to be researched and actually decided and worked with and discussed with native tribes. This is not something that I can decide preemptively. This is something that will have to actually be worked out in terms of political practice with institutions that are created for the sake of doing that. The fact that I myself don't have a specific number for you is not even at all relevant to the debate at hand. That's so stupid. That's like if you asked Mao Zedong what should be the specific territory given to every nation in China, et cetera, and so on. Guess what? He's probably not going to be able to tell you what the exact specific numbers before it even happens. It's just so stupid. I don't have to know the specific numbers to be able to make this argument whatsoever. An institution in the future might have to, but I don't have to.
It's a way of shifting out of the real question. How much land is necessary? And if you're not unable to provide that number, how are we even able to begin a discussion? That's why it's important to.
No, I'm not. Yeah, but I think like you're acting. Wait a second. You're acting like I'm the government and you're a tribal authority and we're negotiating. The problem is that I'm not the government. You're not a tribe. Wait a second. You're not a tribal authority. And we're not negotiating how much land Native Americans should have. All I can give you is a vague answer because this would actually have to be worked out in terms of researching what the kind of needs they have and in terms of listening to each specific tribe. I think it would make a lot more sense to actually talk to each specific tribe and look at what their actual concrete demands are than just give you what I think would be best. That actually has to be worked out. I'm not negotiating with you. This is not a negotiation between me and you. Now, some institution that's set up to figure this out, it's going to have to start giving me exact numbers at some point after doing research and after talking to tribal authorities. But it doesn't have to. I don't have to have that beforehand. That's stupid. I'm not negotiating with you. I'm not the American government. I don't even represent the interests of the American government. That makes no sense at all.
You see, in terms of when you actually discuss with Native Americans, especially tribal leaders, you'll see the treaties are themselves the basis not just for national, for national consciousness, but national development as well. on how much territory was previously owned, was conceded in those treaties, as well as how much of that will be made into economic development. Because all of it can be used for economic development. It wouldn't preclude other indigenous, non-indigenous people from developing there. That's true.
That's not relevant to what I said. I never spoke of whether or not non-indigenous people could develop there. Why do you always say stuff that's just literally wasting time? The main point you made was this. The main point you made was this: was that tribes start off with these treaties that were broken, and that's their basis for claims on land. That's actually the only relevant thing you said to what I was saying. Now, what I'm saying is that maybe as a political, wait a second. Maybe as a political,
that's really disrespectful, man.
Because you literally just say stupid stuff. Like, come on, man. You literally don't reply to me. Why do you? Let me ask you a concrete question. Why do you say stuff not related to the point that I made? Why do you say stuff not related?
I'm trying to be as respectful and concise with my answers.
No, you're not being concise. You're not saying stuff that's actually relevant to the points that I'm making. You're saying stuff that that is not even relevant. When did I ask you whether or not non-indigenous people would be able to work on the land? When did I ask you that? How is that relevant to the contention at hand? The contention at hand is very specific, and you did not address that with that. Where you did address that was with saying that the basis for Native American claims to more land is on these treaties themselves. Now, we can start from that point because that's actually relevant to what I said. Now, these treaties as a political tool for bargaining, yes, they can be used, but that does not mean that the Native Americans in practice will actually get all the land from these political treaties. Now, this may be a basis for saying there was an injustice, an immorality, an illegality, et cetera, and so on, and there needs to be some kind of compensation for this is illegality and this immorality and so on. But that itself does not mean that they absolutely have to get all of the lands in these treaties in order for them to be done right by. That makes no sense at all. You've never at any point shown why it would be wrong to give them the land that fits their existing economic, spiritual, and developmental and political needs. You've never actually gave a reason why that would be wrong. You never at one point gave a reason why that would be wrong. You asked me what that land would be. I can't give you an answer, but I don't actually need to give you an answer, and it's not actually relevant. That would be something that would have to be decided by an institution of some kind. Obviously, not just by an individual debater. That makes no sense.
But that's what's important. If you're not able to provide concise, specific answers, how are we supposed to be able to trust that this position will how this position will actually affect the material reality?
You don't have to trust it. You don't have to trust it. If you don't, wait a second. No, wait a second. No, that's not how politics work. It doesn't work just because you decide to trust me. If you don't trust me, wait a second. If you don't trust me, just go ahead and continue with your land back stuff. It's probably going to fail. You just don't have to trust me. I'm not trying to win specifically over your trust. You just don't have to trust me. I can tell you what my political vision is for America. If you don't believe in that because you, for some reason, want me to be able to give you precise numbers before we've even gained any sort of political power in America at all, before the scenario we're talking about is such a futuristic scenario in the context of today that the idea that I can give you precise numbers is just absolutely ridiculous. I gave you an answer, enough land to meet their existing needs. Now, how we determine what that is, that's obviously going to have to be worked out by institutions that are greater than any individual, and it's going to have to be negotiated with tribal authorities. I can't give you the exact number on that. If you can't trust me because you have this ridiculous demand that I give you an exact number on how much land every single Native American tribe that exists in America will get, I mean, that's a you problem. If that's the case, you don't have to trust me. Just go on, do your land back stuff. That's your decision. But it's gonna politically fail. There's no future for it. It's not pragmatic. It has nothing to do with socialism. It is in every sense of the word wrong. It's politically wrong. It's just not going to work. It's just not going to be successful. If you can prove me wrong, go ahead. I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to attack you if you want to prove me wrong. But I don't agree with it. I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, indigenous people, if you talk with indigenous leaders, they'll say it's the treaties is how.
You already said that. You already said that. You already said that. You already said that, and I already addressed it. You repeat the same thing. I did. I said that maybe that will be. I said that maybe that's a negotiation. I said that maybe that's powerful as a negotiation tactic, but that doesn't mean that in practice they will actually get all the lands that they were historically promised. In practice, they will likely get different amount of land.
Yeah, they might actually get more land in that case.
No, they're not.
Because the spiritual needs and the economic needs of indigenous people are directly tied to the resources that were on their traditional land.
No, it's not.
And on the land.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Because their needs. No, because their material conditions change. Material conditions change.
I'm putting you on the burner. Provide specific examples of how the treaties do not actually provide for the economic and spiritual needs of indigenous people, which is something.
Wait a second. Wait a second. I didn't say they don't provide. I didn't say that they don't provide. I never said that they don't provide for the spiritual and economic needs of indigenous people. When did I say that?
You literally just said right before I answered that, like, we don't like.
That's not what I said.
Treaties don't actually like. It's not like inevitable that like the treaties will fulfill their economic.
That's not what I said. That's literally not. We can look. This is all recorded, so people can look through the video and see that's not what it said. What I actually said. What I actually have been arguing this whole time is not that these treaties won't give Native Americans enough to fully develop to meet their needs. I'm saying that
now you're saying just needs in general.
That's not. You literally are so fucking stupid. You're misquoting me. Can you let me actually tell you what I've been talking about? When I say needs, I'm obviously talking about their spiritual, economic, etc. needs. You fucking idiot. So will you let me just finish? I never said that these treaties won't meet their economic, developmental, and spiritual needs. I'm saying that what I'm arguing is that we can meet those needs without actually fully fulfilling those treaties. So, for example, in some cases, we can give them less land than was promised in those treaties, and it might still meet their economic and spiritual needs because guess what? Well, let me guess what? Because their material needs have changed since those treaties were signed because it's been hundreds of years, and they're a much, much, much smaller population of the country than they used to be. The economic and spiritual needs of 1 million people is going to be different than the economic and spiritual needs of 50,000 people or 100,000 people. So it's different. Like quantity actually matters. How many people are we talking about actually matters because you need more for more people, less for less people. It's that common sense. It's literally that simple. It's literally that simple, dude. It's that simple. Their needs have changed, and what more people, the needs of a bigger group of people are going to be greater than the needs of a smaller group of people. It's that simple. They are smaller than they were in the past.
Yes, but you're never explaining how the lesser amount will provide for those needs. You're just saying, like, look at the quantity.
I can explain how it might provide for those needs. For example, if you stop pipelines that go through Native American territory, let them build their own pipelines or have their own businesses. If you give them lands that have profitable resources and minerals and so on, that will benefit them. It's gonna be different in the case of each tribe. But you can just, in a very pragmatic and practical way, work out what kind of needs these specific tribes have. And I'm sure they would be much happier doing that than what they currently have. I'm sure they would be. That's much more than what the current government is offering.
I'm sure they would be, but it wouldn't create the harmonious structure that like indigenous people are looking for.
I'm not trying to create a harmonious tribal structure. That's not what I'm trying to create.
No, not tribal.
You talked about tribal authorities.
United States. What do you like? This is the essence of like the Soviet Union having multiple nations. Like what's it like? What?
Dude, you literally. So I went through like a whole hour trying to get you to admit that your example of the Soviet Union was like largely different. So why do you bring it up again? Why do you bring the Soviet Union up again when the example is completely different? Why? Just why?
Because you see multiple examples of like national.
No, you see examples of national sovereignty. That's not the same thing.
In general, having autonomy, having different levels of autonomy, and having autonomy that does actually fit within each of their within small territories, within large territories.
Did I at any point say that I'm against the idea of there being autonomous zones? No, I actually gave China as an example where you have successfully existing autonomous zones. I said maybe something like that might work in America. The difference between me and you is the magnitude. I don't think that these autonomous zones or these sovereign republics have to represent the one-to-one agreements made by treaties hundreds of years ago. I think that they should represent instead the really existing material conditions of today. That's the difference.
Yeah. So why, like you said, that's why I always bring up Kazakhstan. How does 673 million acres fulfill the needs, like just fulfill the needs of what 6-7 million people in current Kazakhstan and prior to the Kazakh SSR.
I mean, wait a second, but it does because especially in current. No, I can give it an answer. It's because right now the majority of the people who live in that area, they're Kazakhstan. In the past, it wasn't a majority, but it was a large percentage. And we're talking about. I mean, secondly.
Why are you running away from the question?
Wait, what question? What question do you have?
I'm saying, what percentage? What are you talking about?
And which year? Currently, I can give you the current percentage. That's really easy.
You can look from 1939 all the way to 1991. The population of Kazakhstan was pretty much lower than the Russians and the Ukrainians.
Dude, this is so stupid. I literally wait a second. We already had this discussion. Wait a second. We had this discussion already. I never said that they were the majority for all time. I said the majority right now.
No. What I'm saying is that and even then, when they weren't the majority, they was
And guess what? When they weren't the majority, they were a hell of a lot larger than the Native American tribes in America. That's my point.
And yet they had more land than about more than half of what the mainland United States is for 6 million.
Yeah, because we're talking. Wait a second though. That's because we're talking about deciding the land between groups that have lived in Russia and in Kazakhstan, etc. in this general era. For many centuries. In America's just a lot smaller than Russia. America's just a lot smaller. So wait a second.
Not much. It's had.
Wait a second though. One, America's smaller. Two, the population of natives in America is smaller than the populations of Kazakhs in the area that they were given. Like you can't you're taking two different historical contexts. In the context of Russia and Kazakhstan and in these areas, Russia has always been a gigantic, huge country. Now America's a big country too, but it's not as big. So when you're distributing land in the context of Russian big space, it's going to be different than when you're distributing land in the context of America because one, there's less land.
Look at 138 million acres was the amount of land indigenous peoples held before the Dawes Act, which then reduced it down to its modern number.
Yeah, okay. What?
That's still 6 times less than what the Kazakhs received. And can you not see the numbers inordinate?
No. Wait a second. Are you accepting the print? Wait a second. Are you accepting?
Don't cut me off here. I've been letting you talk.
No, you haven't really been. We've been both cutting each other off.
I'm letting you talk very easily. You're gonna see in the pre-recording.
Yo, we got Haas is going.
So just wrap it up really fast.
Kazakhstan's population to the amount of land it has. It is incredibly disproportionate. And yet, under the Soviet Union, that's how much land, 673 million acres was how much land the Kazakhs owned under the Soviet Union.
I already replied to this. The reason why that's the case is because the land which was under the control of the USSR is far greater than the land that's under the control of America, so they can afford to distribute more land.
Oh, so that's proportionate and not just the size of
No, I'm saying it has to be proportionate also to the size of the country to begin with.
It's not even proportionate to its own population. 673 million acres is not proportionate to 6 million people.
It is in the context of Russia, in which case we have it is in the context of the USSR because the USSR has a lot of land in general. And so, I mean, yeah, it is.
And even then, indigenous peoples aren't asking for 600.
I didn't say they were. Yeah. Okay, but you're not. Okay, so you say that you let me finish, but are you letting me finish right now?
Go for it.
So let me make my point. So there's one point that you have not addressed that I've repeatedly said, which is that it's because there's a difference in the amount of land that is under the control of America and the amount of land that's under the control of the USSR. I mean, look at how large Ukraine is. Look at how large Kazakhstan is. Look at how large Russia is. I think Russia may be the biggest land mass in the world. So you're gonna have to take into account how much land actually belongs to the country to begin with when you're distributing land up. You never address that point. Secondly, it seems like you're now acting upon the premise of my own argument, which is that native land must be determined by their living and existing needs, not historical treaties, because now you're making an argument based upon what you think they need. If you think they need a lot,
on what you said.
Yeah, you're making an argument based upon my premise. So are you abandoning your original premise and saying that now it must be based upon their living needs?
I'm trying to show that even under your framework, what you're saying, like giving the amount of land that's basically needed to indigenous people on an amount that you're unable to get, is somehow better or somehow the correct move, when that wasn't the case with Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan had
it was the case. I'm saying it was the case. That is what they needed. That is what they needed. That is what they needed.
You moved away from your own.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. That is that did represent that. I never at one point. We never at one point established this idea that this does not represent the living needs of the people of Kazakhstan. I think it absolutely did. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that their needs are different than the needs of Native Americans because it exists in a different context. It exists in the context of the USSR, which had more land in general. And so their needs, their political needs, their spiritual needs, and so on are going to be reflective of the specific context of the USSR and of the Russian context. The needs of Native Americans are going to be based upon the specific context of America, which is a much smaller country than the USSR was. You never reply to that. You never actually apply to that. Like, this is the limits, the context of the need.
Because it's not the approach the Soviet Union took in terms of Kazakhstan. And if you look at it,
so you're saying that the Soviet Union decided this just based upon hundreds of year old treaties, and that was the entire basis for their decision?
No, through thousands of years of Kazakhstan's indigenous tradition on their own steppes and territories.
So it wasn't based upon. So it wasn't based upon what you're saying. It was not based upon. You even by your own argument, it was not based upon. It was not based upon the historical treaties. You just admitted that.
Because they didn't have.
Yeah. Okay. So why do you use it as an example of they never even had these treaties? It's not an example of what you're talking about. If anything, it's an example of what I'm talking about because they did do it on a practical basis based upon the existing realities in the Soviet Union existing at the time. They didn't reference back to laws from hundreds of years ago. They based it upon existing realities. Anyway, how's this going live?
They based it on thousands of years of Kazakh tradition.
That's part of, and that's, guess what? That's a part of today. That's a part of presently existing material reality.
They could have given a third, half, 10% of Kazakhstan proportionate to the amount of population of Russia, which is about over 100.
Wait a second. I never said that it had to be proportionate to. Wait a second. I never said that it had to be proportionate to the population. I said it had. No, I said that it had to relate to their existing needs, which may not be 1-to-1 proportionate with what percentage of the population they are. Maybe American group, right? And maybe there's only like 5,000 of them or something. But maybe they need more land than just what 5,000 divided 333 million divided by 5,000 would be to reflect their needs. I'm just saying that these decisions should not be decided based upon treaties, but based upon a scientific analysis of what kind of needs they have and a political dialogue between Native Americans and whatever government institution has been set up to do this. I'm not saying that it has. When I say that it must reflect their needs, I'm not saying that you just take the population, you divide it by the native group, and then you give them that portion of land. That does not reflect living needs whatsoever. I mean, because we also have to talk about what land, right? What kind of land? Does the land have valuable resources? Is the land fertile? What kind of land? I'm talking that, so that's not even relevant to what I'm talking about. You just bastardize my position. Now, anyway, how is this going live? So we're gonna have to end it here. If you want to debate more in the future, we can. But yeah, so this will just be recorded. I think someone probably posted, and yeah.